You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right, folks. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope everybody's starting their week off right, but we're going to start your week off right here on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. We have a great guest, and we need this guest. We actually need this guest. We've been dealing with some heavy topics. Things have been getting a little wild in multiple different places and our country for that matter. And we're going to talk about all of those things tonight, but make sure you like, you subscribe. Down in the description below, number one, are all of Ami's links. Make sure you go follow him on all of his social media platforms. Make sure you support him, but also down there is a membership link if you'd like to support this channel and be a member. We really appreciate that. Make sure you're following us on all our other platforms as well. But I do want to say hi to everybody over in the chat just real quick. We got Cloudy PX, Lori Matthews, Karma Sassy, Debbie Blue. We got the Obscure moderator, just like the Obscure YouTuber. I want to say thank you and acknowledge all our mods. Thank you guys for what you do. We appreciate you. You make this channel what it is. We got Melissa Walker, JP6 Gunner, and many, many more. And any of you that I missed, I apologize. And if you haven't said hello yet, make sure you do so. Folks, we've had a busy week out here. We got a lot of stuff going on in the background. We got a lot of other great guests. But what we have is a guest that I've been wanting to get on for a long time. Many of you know who he is. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring on Ami Kozak, everybody.
Oh, great to be here, Gary. How are you? Pleasure.
I didn't know if I was going to get Ami Kozak or Tucker Carlson. I'm just glad that you're here. I would much rather talk to you than Tucker any day of the week, or Candace, or any of your...
I don't know who I'm going to be. I mean, Dangerous Liberty. I mean, why is Liberty dangerous? You know what's not dangerous? Qatar. I love that. I promised your moderator I would do it right off the bat, so there you go.
You took care of Jen. That was Jen's one request before the show. She's like, I don't care if you do anything else, which, by the way, that would have been my request too. So, look, there's a lot of craziness going on in the world. And I got to tell you, man, I think like you being in the public scene is such a great thing to have. I think you're bringing a lot of common sense to what's happening. And of course, it's really important to introduce humor and look through that lens. I think comedians have always done a great job keeping their finger on the pulse of America, and I don't know, just kind of like snapping us back to our senses and laughing at what should be laughed at,
right?
And ridiculing what should be ridiculed. And there's a lot that should be ridiculed right now. But I'd like to ask you, like, where did you start with all of this? Tell us a little bit about Ami Kozak, your origins. Give us your origin story.
Yes. So born and raised in Doha, Qatar. No. So I originally come from the music world. I'm a professional musician, trained musician. I've been doing that for a really long time. And then around 2019, I started doing some comedy. I was always kind of socially funny to friends and family, but professionally I was in the music scene for a while, doing music for film and television. I lived out in LA from 2011 to 2021. And then got into the comedy stuff, mainly doing a lot of online content, social media. I had been performing on stage as a musician for a little while, but then started doing some stand-up as well. And it was all kind of just for fun. And my first initial victims in the impersonation camp were a lot of the online gurus. Gary Vee was one of the early ones I used to like on some real shit. Like, I love that so much, Gary. Like Paramount Tactical. Like, you're so tactical about that. And I love that so much because it's positivity. Right? Like, on some real shit, like, I love that so much for you. Like, keep up that hustle and grind and keep shooting things, because shooting things is about getting on that grind, on that shooting hustle. I love that. So initially it was all Gary Vee stuff and a lot of online gurus I would make fun of. And it was all in jest. I mean, I would, imitation is really the biggest form of flattery. I knew a lot of these characters and people pretty well. And, I was doing people I really admired. Jordan Peterson, I'd liked a lot of his content, like a lot, and it was in the early days, it was all basically a form of flattery, it was just for fun. So those were the early stuff I was doing. I was always impersonating growing up and doing impressions. It's kind of how I taught myself how to sing as a singer, is by, doing impressions of other singers. I had a good ear for that. And I had a natural proclivity for impressions. And then fast forward, I built up an audience on that kind of funny shtick. started doing a lot of stand-up in the New York comedy scene. And then post October 7th, something kind of shifted, I think, in all of us in the civilized world. There was the October 7th moment in Israel, and I'm very connected to Israel. I'm a modern Orthodox Jew. I have friends and family there. I'm a practicing religious Jewish person, so that's a big part of my DNA, figuratively and literally. But also on October 8th, I think that was more about not just what happened in Israel and the immediate trauma and tragedy of that moment, but in the way that the West reacted to it, I think showed and revealed a very strange sickness going on in the moral inversion, the moral confusion of such a moment, where it was very obvious, like, who the good guys and the bad guys were, who was on the side of civilization and who was on the side of barbarism. And you started to see, some of the worst displays of humanity in the acts of October 7th, and then the worst displays in the reactions to it, the ripping down of hostage posters, the moral decay and depravity on our college campuses in the West, elite institutions. So I started to see that and began speaking out about that and getting a little more serious. I ended up debating some prominent people we could talk about and started, kind of going into that lane, which ended up, I think, deepening my relationship with the audience. And then fast forward to more recent events, as we've seen, in that space, just began speaking out about all these other issues. I was never shy about my political opinions. I didn't hide them, but, I sort of kept the two separate, and they sort of kind of came together. And that's where I find myself today, in this sort of world that I think is constantly revealing itself and is in need for people who can not only tell you things, but show you things. And I started using the comedy as a way to do that, because laughter is another really a strong form of agreement. When we all laugh at something, whether it's a funny or a stereotype or a satirical thing, you're kind of all in agreement about the observation. And showing is a uniquely powerful way, as opposed to telling somebody what to think. Showing somebody something is very, very powerful and impactful. And I think you can show someone to be as virtuous as they are, as silly as they are, or as evil as they are. It sort of just brings out the truth of something.
Yeah, so you left LA in 2021. Now, was that primarily because of COVID? I don't know why you'd leave. I mean, the Jews run LA. So
right, right. Yes, I was cast out of the Jewish cabal of LA. They said no more. No, it was post COVID. LA sort of had this COVID fetish, as a lot of people in like the free states and Florida were moving on and adapting and getting back to real life as soon as possible. LA, in the culture there, certainly had a way of wanting this to be permanent for as long as possible. It sort of brought out the misanthropic, people hating instincts and sensibilities of that sort of woke left culture. No, we need to be responsible and stay inside. And people weren't fighting to get back to life and back to work in this very weird, bizarre way, which kind of makes sense, because in the real life world, where you have to be responsible for your own, families, communities, work, life, relationships, for a lot of people in that world, like, those things aren't going well. So when there's this huge pandemic, it's a nice excuse to like wallow in your ideology. So I think that was a big part of it. But even as it was coming back, I'd been away from, I have 4 kids. I have 4 kids. So we had parents and grandparents on the East Coast that we wanted them to still be close to. So there was a practical decision to move, but also, LA had run its course in that way, where, you could be eating at a restaurant with your family, and then like a junkie walks by and it's just like, yo, what's good? And I'm just, at a certain point, you have to ask yourself if you want to raise your kids in that environment. So that was a big part of it for sure.
Yeah. So, we just had the election there in LA. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know I can't say one way or the other. It sure looks like fraud. Sure, it's weird how all of this stuff kind of takes place, and how Spencer Pratt was ahead, then he wasn't, and then in the last few hours, we have everybody pull ahead, and what's your take on that?
Listen, Democrats are very bad at policy, but they're good at politics, Yeah. So say what you want. Could be a total fraud. It's a total fraud. They stole it so badly that she went bass fishing for the election and she caught it. She caught it bad. But at the end of the day, they play that game, and that's the game you're playing, that you have to win, right? So it's not. I don't know. I don't know if there was foul play, and that would have to be really demonstrated. You have to find out what's going on there. It seems absurd, right, that these politicians who run these cities and states into the ground continue to hold victory. But there is a whole game to be played on how good your ground game is at the grassroots level, how you can work with different special interest groups to rally votes and convince gullible people that the reason things are bad is you just haven't done enough of the thing you've been doing for years. If only you get a little bit more time. You can always point to, they sort of, the Democrats oftentimes on the left, they'll present them, they're unfalsifiable, infallible, because, the only reason things are so bad is their ideas weren't implemented enough, And so I remember with this when Larry Elder was running against Gavin Newsom, like I think it was fresh after COVID. It's like there's no more prime example of just someone who's the biggest fraud, the biggest hypocrite, and yet they continue to do everything they can do. We're doing everything we can do. As the houses are burning down in Malibu, we're working with our local, state, and politician officials. He's just doing the dance, and one has to wonder. But eventually, people, if they keep winning the elections, people just vote with their feet and they leave, and that's the biggest indicator that of where people's sentiments really are, and they just vote with their feet. If they continue to win through these other kind of games that they play, even if it's technically legal and works in their favor, people just vote with their feet. But yeah, they're good at playing politics, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Anytime you have these Democratic strongholds, I think we just need to like completely change the word. Any place where the word democratic is used, whether it's a party or a nation state, it just needs to be replaced with autocratic.
Right.
That's really what's going on there. They don't believe in democracy. They believe on predetermined outcomes, especially when it comes to elections. And we definitely saw that in 2020. I think we were too big to fail when it came to this last election, I think. And of course, there were some unique opportunities when it came to COVID that I think that a lot of people out there capitalized on. And, going into kind of what you've been dipping your toe into and really doing a really good job with it, whether it's Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, this is kind of where I cross paths with you, because I started seeing you in my feed because I've been covering the Charlie Kirk assassination going back to September. Kind of made aware of what Candace Owens was doing, and what I saw taking place back at late November, early December was someone that was clearly using influence operations that I thought were more sophisticated than she should have been capable of using. Now, I don't know if she was ever tied to anything, whether we're talking about political or foreign adversaries, but what I did know is that clearly, based on what she was doing, there is hardly a political adversary or foreign adversary that wouldn't latch onto that real quick. She was dividing this country. She was dividing the right. She was undermining every institution that we have in the United States. And ultimately, where I've always thought her real target was undermining the Trump administration, which I genuinely do. I think like the Trump administration and the MAGA movement is our last hope for this country. I'm really concerned of what happens. And I know everybody says that every election, but I think we have some really unique things going on in 2028 when the next election is, because what we're going to have is the Democrats pack the court. They're going to take over the Supreme Court. They've already said this. We know that if we lose the midterms, that they are going to impeach Trump again. And, they're going to pack different federal judges. They're going to put what we see going on there. They're going to open the borders again. Like, what's your take on the future of this country? And then we can kind of bring it back to possibly Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, which that's kind of like when I first saw this, I never imagined seeing this coalesce into Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Buckley Carlson, suddenly coming out of nowhere, and many other influencers. So
yeah, it doesn't surprise me, mainly because they've been on a divisive, divide the right campaign since October 8th, really. Like all of a sudden, the strange thing is they like to, there's this narrative on the woke right side of things that likes to pin, things on the neocons that's been destroying MAGA and destroying the conservative movement. And I'm like, historically, like, these were all normative standard positions to support the only ally and only democracy in the Middle East was the American position. It was Trump's position. Nothing changed. The only people dividing the right, the people who are making this departure, creating this wedge issue between Israel and America, between Christians and Jews, are Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. They started this. And so when they criticized people like Ben Shapiro or anyone else for criticizing that, for going and departing and being agents of division and confusion, they then project that onto people like Ben and say, you're dividing the right. This was this whole thing I remember after Amfest, and Ben I thought made a heroic speech in which he called out these people who were divisive, who were agents of confusion and demoralization. And he was criticized for being the divisive one. He didn't make a divisive speech at ANFest. He made a unifying speech about divisive people that you actually have to call out. And I think for too long, what happened is the right sort of developed a reflex that was appropriate over that, that was appropriate against sort of the left. There was an instinct against the left authoritarian cancel culture that dominated our culture and our politics for so long, through Obama, through Biden, through all that. Like when Twitter was woke and you couldn't say anything, when YouTube was woke and you couldn't post anything, during the height of COVID, when it really peaked, and during BLM, during all of these things, when you talk about a subject, you talk about affirmative action, you're called a racist. You're called a racist whether you do anything or not. It's just in you based on the fact that you're a white person. You have it. And so this instinct to respond to pressure or criticism from the left developed this reflex on the right, which is to say, whenever we hear any sort of pressure or criticism, it's from the left and it's illegitimate and it's not in good faith, and we're going to push back against it. And that was good in combating the left because the left's criticisms were illegitimate. But now in right-wing victory, in success, all of a sudden we have all of this infighting, because when people have stepped, and pushed the Overton window out of bounds into a place that we're just like, hey, you can't talk about actual policy. You can't discuss affirmative action if a bunch of people in the room are actually racist, if they actually hold these abhorrent views, or actually anti-Semitic. You can't joke around in those environments, and you can't have serious discussions about policy if people are the very caricatures that the left claimed they had been for so long. So the worst thing you can do is call for unity with people like that. And that's exactly what the left did, and they lost. They united with the worst fringes in their movement. You had Kamala Harris saying, Kamala Harris would get up there and say, Kamala Harris, she, hers. Now, do I think Kamala Harris cares about the trans issue or anything? No, but she was trying to appeal to the sort of what she perceived was the popular, younger momentum of her movement, and it ended up completely collapsing the left in 2024. It ended up weakening it. And I think the same thing will happen on the right. And there was this call to, I remember, we need unity after Charlie Kirk. We need unity. It's like, no. We need clarity. We need standards. We need to make sure we don't fall victim and prey to the same things that took down the left in 2024. Because now what's going on politically is post 2028, while the right is embroiled in all this infighting, the left is just sitting by and going, all right, we're going to focus on politics and victory. And all they have to do now, if you're AOC, is point to the right, to a bunch of interviews on Tucker Carlson, and say, you see, Nazis on the right. And they used to make that shit up with tiki torches and Trump derangement syndrome, but now they're not making it up. You're just handing them victory on a silver platter. So I think you need to not confuse cancel culture with legitimate criticism, having standards and judgment. Free speech goes both ways. If you want to have free speech to say whatever you want and actually say horrible things and believe horrible things and spread horrible ideas, then we're going to use our free speech to criticize that. And that's not cancel culture. That's part of free speech. And so there's been so much confusion around those issues. And I think that's a product of right-wing victory, that there were some people who really cared about policy and issues and principles and values. And there were other people who were along for the fame game ride, where they put fame before integrity, where they cosplayed and were cultural parasites like Tucker and Candace and latched onto these movements and then saw an opportunity to expand their audience, their influence, their power. So they did all that, and they are the bad faith actors that will, if not properly confronted and called out, take down the entire thing.
Yeah, it's like one big, I don't know, Lincoln Project tiki torch operation that's taking place here. The Lincoln Project racists that are standing there. And now all they've done is take this to a national scale. And then ultimately we have Candace Owens going to Russia, which I thought was I really thought that was an overstep. Like you kind of showed your hand a little too soon, as far as I'm concerned, going to Russia. And I thought that was interesting. We'll talk more about that. But there's a lot of folks that after September 10th, or at September 10th, 2025, I never heard so much talk about Zionism, the Jews, Israel, as we started hearing, right? Like, what do you think it is that the right is so vulnerable to these anti-Semitic tropes?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, if anything, let's just pause for a moment. The fact that months after Charlie Kirk's horrible death, the fact that we're talking only pretty much exclusively about what? Israel, Bibi, Zionism when there is no evidence for Israeli involvement in that at all is only further. That's proof and evidence of the brain rot that is anti-Semitism and Jew obsession that has possessed parts of the right, that has parasitized the minds of so many on the right. Let's like it's not like it was actually based on anything. Charlie Kirk never publicly took a stand against Israel. Did he have frustrations internally with people, with possible donors who were disagreeing with his views and how he was handling Tucker Carlson? Sure. Every single movement, I've got news for you, has infighting internally, because on a big, massive organization, whether it's a big pro-life movement, whether it's a big First Amendment or Second Amendment movement, I've been to conferences that are all Zionists and everyone agrees on the ideology, but everyone also hates each other because it's a huge organization and there's a lot of ego and a lot of stuff and a lot of money and donations, and it's a massive operation. So yeah, if you take private screenshots and correspondence and you post them online and you act as though those are representative of someone's public stances, that's ridiculous. If you took my private screenshots that I've had over the course of my life, we're all going to hell if you do that. We all have a private correspondence and persona and rapport with people where we're honest and we're venting. That is not reflective of what our refined public positions and stances are. So this, people have already, our lies have been repeated so much that they've become almost common sense, which is a real recipe of and a real sign of this like sort of anti-Semitic brain rot, where it's like, oh yeah, no, obviously, like, you know, Charlie was turning on Israel and obviously he was going against everything and he was being pulled in that, he was going in that direction, he was going to come out, and obviously Israel wanted to stop him. It's like, that's all nonsense based on nothing. What? Because there were Israeli cell phones found on campus. Yeah, there's been foreign exchange students on campus every semester, including Israelis. None of it's evidence. It's all made up as a attention power grab by Candace Owens to use the opportunity to sort of, I would say, rewrite history, rewrite her relationship with Charlie and with Turning Point, to the fact that she was cast out because she was going nuts and her game, and people were sort of seeing her for what she was. And she wants to rewrite that. That's why she posts text messages from 2018, 2017, 2015 to latch onto the Charlie Kirk clout, doing the very thing to him and his legacy that she claims everyone else is doing, which is destroying it, smearing his. Think about it. After Charlie Kirk was killed, there were like leftists celebrating in the street, you know, like, we're happy that it happened. And who did Candace make the target of her? Is she calling? She's calling.
She is calling. Oh my God.
Is that Mossad? It's Mossad. Yeah, she's calling from Russia. Is it a Russian number? Yeah, it's Russian. It's Russian. I knew it. Every time I talk shit about her on the live stream, somebody.
Wild thing is my freaking phone is silenced. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry about that.
That must have been Mossad trying to get me to stop. All right, you guys. The point is, Candace has done the very thing she's projecting. She's claimed that everyone else is doing. When the left was celebrating, when people on the far left were celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, yeah, we got him. Who was the subject of Candace's ire? Charlie's closest friends, his family, his widow. That's what she's done. So I think it's really revealed what her true intentions and motivations are. But anyway, that's besides the point. In general, all of this about anti-Semitism on the right, why is there an appetite for it? Well, there's a couple things. I think that, for one, you could trace it back to, you know, there's been a loss of faith in institutions in general. And that I think I attribute to a lot that happened during COVID and BLM and all of these things where a lot of the population lost faith in institutions. And while there was massive institutional failure during COVID, I think that, you know, there was a lot of just distrust, you know, kind of enshrined into on the right into a lot of people. So when they just look around, what happens is, you know, observationally, you can look around and look at a snapshot, which is often what the left does. So that's how I think it's very appropriate to call them the woke right, because the left will take a snapshot. Hey, billionaires, poor people. There must be exploitation. Class capitalism is evil, because all I see is a nice apartment or a mansion here and I see slums here. It must be that these people are taking from this people. And on the right, they say, hey, Jews represented here. Jews are over here. There are Jews in positions of success. There are Jews in media. It must, and I don't trust the institutions anymore. It must be that the Jews and that narrative, which is very appealing to me, is controlling me, is responsible for all of these problems in our society. I also think that for a long time, you know, when you could be oriented in a direction of fighting the left for a long time, and like that's your orientation, it's the left that's keeping me down, especially if I'm like a disenfranchised white male, and it's this excess woke leftism that's telling me I'm the worst person ever. Some of them have attributed some of that to Jews on the left, and even though Jews are represented across the intellectual spectrum, there are Jews on the right, there are Jews on the left, there are Jews in science, in Nobel laureates. I mean, the biggest capitalists were Jewish. Some of the biggest socialists were Jewish. They're just overrepresented in intelligentsia, which is we could talk about. But in general, if your orientation has been to fight the left, and then you basically, it's like you were raised on Ben Shapiro own the libs clips, right? Thug life clips. We look at this guy owning the college liberal on campus. Great. But then what happens when that movement succeeds? The only thing you had to be countercultural and go against the grain in like 2015 or 2016 was to join a Young Americans for Freedom chapter on campus and be for lower taxes and two-parent families and maybe be pro-life and pro-gun. And then you were like considered a cultural warrior. I mean, as your identity, you're like, man, I'm going against the grain. I'm fighting the good fight. But in the victory of those things, in Trump's victory in 2024, now what do? You're left with yourself looking in the mirror and saying, okay, now I have to actually pick up the pieces of my own life and clean my bloody room, So what do? You can't. And if you want to go against the grain in that environment, you can't go left because you've been fighting the left for so long. So you just go further right and further right. What's a different sacred cow I can now talk about now that everything's allowed? Let's go after the Jews. And let's orient myself towards those people out there on the internet like Fuentes or Myron Gaines or Jake Shields who are saying the things you're not supposed to say. And you like look at life in those power structures. And if it's a choice between blaming others and blaming themselves, people seldom blame themselves. So the easiest thing you can do is look at successful people. And there's a lot of Jews disproportionate to their population who are successful and say that as a product of their success, they're the cause of my failure. So they make the perfect scapegoat, plus the sort of religious theological components that come into it as them being framed as enemies of Christians and all that kind of stuff that has deep historical soil to go off of. I think that's a big reason why you see a lot of people on the right now who are feeling disenfranchised, but they can't blame the left anymore because the left lost big time. They have to find a different scapegoat.
Well, yeah. And, just like you said, originally, when Charlie Kirk was first killed, we saw this huge spiritual revival, conservative revival. We had this coming together. Yep. But, there were just a lot of people that knew that they could exploit everything you just spoke about. Like there was deep distrust amongst the right that they knew they could exploit. It all happened under the Biden administration. It all happened with COVID. It happened with January 6th. It happened with the 2020 election being stolen. It happened with the weaponization of the DOJ. Like we all were like, we can't trust the DOJ, can't trust the FBI because James Comey, all of these things. And we got into this default thinking, just like you're talking about. It's like, well, if now, even though Trump has come in, he has a completely new cabinet. It's not the same DOJ. Yeah, there's still freaking deep state operatives dug in there. There's no doubt about it. But the main people that are running this, I can't point to anything. I tell everybody, always be skeptical of government. I don't care if it's Trump running it. I don't care if it's Kash Patel running the FBI, Dan Bongino. We should be skeptical of what's going on there. But, looking at the Charlie Kirk assassination as skeptical as I possibly can, I can't see any corruption. And of course, we keep calling it Fed slop and all these other things. But I can't see a gap in timelines. You have to search, you have to look, especially with the amount of information that we have. But that's what took place. Is like there was a lot of people that just got so used to distrusting the government, and I get it and I understand. But then you have these grifters come out and like, hey, you know what? It was a palm gun, and this is a CIA / Mossad / I don't know, French Foreign Legion. I don't know how that happened. There's tunnels underneath Charlie. There's camera guns. There's, Tyler Robinson actually was on campus.
Brigitte Macron's penis somehow is involved. I don't know how that
I think the shot came from that, actually. That's what I've heard. But,
Bonjour. Yeah.
And then there's the almost like the
well, yeah. I was just going to add that, the problem with conspiracy theories is that sometimes conspiracy theories are true, and there are sometimes, incidences that actually really affect lots of people. Say, like with COVID, where you could call it a conspiracy, but the idea is it just eventually led to such a distrust in that we weren't being told the truth and we weren't allowed to ask questions about the truth. And I think the people who were skeptical about it all were ultimately vindicated. But the problem is that when you sort of lay the groundwork for conspiracy, the ultimate conspiracy that is age old, tale as old as time, is is the Jewish question, is the Jewish conspiracy, the great Jewish conspiracy going back to the protocols of the elders of Zion, put in by Henry Ford into every vehicle, this age-old conspiracy to blame the Jews for all the world's problems. Gad Saad talks about 5 degrees of separation before you blame the Jew. You can find every which way to do it, any which way you slice it, left, right, and center. So it's the age-old conspiracy. So once a society, a population, and a culture has been primed for conspiracy, it's only a matter of time before they arrive at, hey, maybe it's the Jews behind everything. And that answers, I think, your question more succinctly in terms of why we're at the place we're at today. It's just that when people feel disenfranchised and the society's in decline, I think anti-Semitism says more about the society than it does even about the Jews. It's like a symptom of something much, much broader and much deeper.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are converging right here in this moment in time. A lot of different conditions here in the United States and everything else that have made this possible. I've been thinking about this. Like, there was no other, I don't think there was any other time in history prior to now that something like the Candace Owens nonsense, the fraud would ever be successful. Like, I remember growing up, I don't know how old you are, but I was born in 1980, but I remember growing up, and it's like, even if people were talking about accusations, it's like, hey, you know what? We don't accuse people without evidence. And now accusations, baseless accusations, completely baseless, no evidence. Matter of fact, there's evidence against the possibility of this accusation even being possible. Is not only it's encouraged, it's monetized. It is, it's like, this is what people want. And I also feel like a lot of these people know it's not true.
Sure.
But they just enjoy the feeling. It's literally like, I don't know, some weird, I will say Candace Owens, I say this all the time, like, she has created a new genre of entertainment. It's like this murder mystery, choose your own adventure. You get to participate in this. I deputize you, my fellow investigators. And there's a lot of sad people out there that don't have purpose in their life, and they're jumping on this. And there's a lot of, and of course, it's always fun for the anti-Semites, because now we can say, look, there's a Jew behind it, every problem, and we can pull that out as well.
I think, a lot of the audience is mommy sleuths in their 40s sipping wine saying, oh, my girl Ken is going to uncover some things. And for them, it's almost as indistinguishable from fiction. They're just kind of following along the drama, and everybody loves a good distraction. And the difference now is that you have the vehicle to disseminate this kind of slop without any standards. The internet is open, Twitter is open, and with that you get a lot of expansions of even in the Rogan sphere, like, the opportunity for great ideas to flourish was the case, especially under left-wing authoritarianism in the culture, where all you heard from mainstream media was one narrative, one side. It was dominant on one side. In the podcast universe, you could hear heterodox thinkers, alternative views. And at the time when it was really on the ascent, it was people like Jordan Peterson. It was Douglas Murray. It was Barry Weiss. It was Ben Shapiro. It was the conservatives who were up and coming. And in that success, some of that has become mainstreamified and suffers from the same products of success as the mainstream media did, where it became its own echo chamber. And now certain bad ideas are being recycled in their own positive feedback loop, where everyone's only listening to the people they agree with and reinforcing, I think, the wrong ideas. In the Candace space, I encourage her. I say keep going, because the further and further into just absurdity you go, it just invalidates everything you're building everything on. And to me, it seems like a house of cards that's going to crumble, because if you're just a creature of provocation and the only thing you do is focus on a self-aggrandizement and building the audience, eventually you keep turning and cannibalizing your own audience. So if you can't handle consensus, you turn on the daily, first you turn on the Blexit. You turn on the Democrats and you become a black conservative pundit who starts the Blexit movement. And you love that provocation. You love the attention it gets you. It builds your audience, right? And then you get embraced by the conservative punditry. You get embraced by conservative media, and you build your audience that way. And then once there's consensus around that, then you got to pivot, because you just go against the grain. And if there's too much consensus, that doesn't work. So when consensus builds around this, I think she'll eventually have to pivot a different way, until eventually there's no one left to betray and she'll be alone. I think that's the way it's going, whether it's turning on the Catholic Church, because it's not the real Catholic Church, and then it's turning on Christianity. Who knows? But eventually, when there's consensus, I don't think she does well and can sustain herself in that environment because she's ultimately very parasitic, cosplaying different roles depending on which movement is hot at the time. And now it sort of became cool culturally and edgy to be against the Jews, against Israel. And so against Trump is now the new for Trump, and I think it's rather convenient what's going on and pretty obvious to see once you can see the pattern.
No, it is. I mean, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. Now, what I will say is I honestly thought back in December that the Candace Owens grift would fall apart by, I don't know, mid-January. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we started kind of dovetailing Tucker Carlson into this, Megyn Kelly, a lot of other people started pushing this. I do think there's a huge push artificially on social media. I think there's bots, sock puppets, both foreign and domestic, that are definitely boosting this and amplifying this without a doubt. But what we do see is a pivot. Now suddenly she has on Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, who she's called a pedophile, a human trafficker, a crack, all of which I believe is probably true, alleged, right? So suddenly she's going to have him on, platform him, and not even ask him a single hard. We don't hear any questions about the laptop. We don't hear any questions about him selling influence, which she talked about a lot when both Barack Obama and Biden were in power, him selling influence. And we don't hear any of that. It was just a glazing. And then right after that, she has on Ana Kasparian. So I think there is this, like, she understands she's potentially losing some audience, and now she wants to broaden her audience by appealing to the left. And then out of nowhere, she goes to Russia.
That's what I mean. I think even though it's all sensationalized and we're sort of like everyone's kind of talking about it in a way, it's only highlighting their increased isolation from mainstream normative people. I mean, what does she have left? Now she's in Russia talking to Dugin and these people who are trying to undermine Western civilization itself. And like they call themselves America First by making excuses for radical Islam or going to Russia to talk to America's adversaries and, I don't know, paint a rosy picture of them on Russian state media. Like, this is where we're at. So in a way, while at the same time it seems like people like her are bigger than ever, I think it actually reveals just how isolated they are. And if there's, I don't like to say, oh, it's Qatar or it's this. There's certainly a relationship between manufactured bot accounts that amplify divisive messaging to demoralize the adversaries of Russia or China. There's definitely a game going on there, but it's a dance between the two. But that's where she is now. It's like, look, now you're in Russia on Russian state media talking about how great they are. Tucker did the same thing. And I think eventually, the American people are going to say, this doesn't feel like America First. This feels very, not just, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-American. And that's always where it was headed, and the good, decent people who aren't online every 2 seconds following every tweet and are just tending to their families and working hard. If you polled them and asked them, I'd say they would very much agree. This is not representative of their values or their views.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've been talking about a lot lately. Like, it's hard to figure out the delta between our perceptions online, because if you're on Twitter, you think every person on there is either a leftist or they're this woke right anti-Semitic folks, and like we're never gonna, Massey's gonna win by a landslide. There's no way that Paxton's gonna win. Like, that's the perception you get, and I think both of those were kind of bellwether moments for me, because I wanted to see, like, what is the difference between perception and reality.
Right.
And I think both of those elections kind of opened a lot of people's eyes and realized that it's not as hopeless as it seems. Because again, if you are highly engaged in social media, you're convinced of one thing when I think the reality is something else completely.
Right. It's always a hard metric because it also only takes a concentrated minority to really like make a difference in some respects. But as you can see, in terms of actual policy, like I remember during, what was it, Epic Fury, or when they first bombed the when Trump first bombed the Fordo nuclear sites, like you realize like all of the whatever libertarians online and people screaming and shouting really don't have much effect on actual policy when the adults in the room have to make real decisions when it comes to national defense or American strategic interest in the world. But and so like the relationship between what's online and what's real life, I think there's been this conflation and confusion of confusing popularity with virtue, So people like Megyn Kelly will talk about look how well she's doing, but look at how many views she's getting. Yeah. And that ultimately, if that's her North Star, fine. But that's not my North Star. And I think regular people with integrity say, like, okay, just because something's popular doesn't mean it's virtuous. And just because something's doing well in the moment, that doesn't mean in the long term it will survive and thrive if it's actually evil and has no integrity to it, So I don't confuse that. Is something surging in popularity? Is there virality around a certain trend or thing that's happening? Maybe. Okay. But that doesn't make it right or good. And there are people in the commentariat who will constantly point to the metrics and the views and the ratings doing better than ever. Are you doing good better than ever? Or are you just, making attention and making a splash? Because so what? That doesn't say anything about the merits and substance of your message. Just because it may be resonating and you're persuading a lot of people, you may be persuading a lot of people into darkness, into something very bad. And so we do have to fight against that. But I don't confuse the success of something by its views or popularity. I think they try to flaunt that front and center as sort of a badge of honor. But
well, and sort of logical argument. I see that down in the comments all the time. Like, oh, if Candace wasn't right, then why does she have so many viewers? She has a lot more viewers than you, and whatever it is. It's like, a wise man once said, the truth isn't always popular, but it's always worth it. And, that was Charlie Kirk. And so he understood this concept. I don't care. There was a time when Nazism was really popular in Germany, and the vast majority believed that nonsense. So there's always, and we can even go back to the 1990s where Jerry Springer was the #1 TV show for a lot of years. It didn't mean you were getting a lot of truth or value out of any of that stuff. And by the way, we look at other genres that are extremely popular today, like reality TV that's 100% staged, not true, and total nonsense, and nothing other than fiction and entertainment. And I think that's such a great point. People do need to realize that just because something popular doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's honest, doesn't mean it's true. And the fact is like, I do think more than ever, maybe it's our education system, maybe it's I think a lot of it goes back to this, the like moral, the moral relativism. We went from like this moral relativism to like a reality relativism. That's where it's like, my reality is my truth is my truth. Your truth is your truth. Like Candace wouldn't be able to exist if we went back to basically truth, logic, evidence-based, just reasonable assessment of what's happening in just common sense. Like that is lost on today.
I remember Dave Smith tweeted after Candace made this claim that the French government, French legionnaires were trying to assassinate her. Dave Smith tweeted, "If this turns out to be true, just remember, if they come for Candace, we are all Candace." And I had this thought, and what if it turns out not to be true, Dave? What does that mean? Are we all not Candace now? Are we off the crazy train? No, because ultimately, friendships can be compromising, relationships can be compromising, but people can convince themselves of all sorts of things, of all sorts of motivations. But we're now in the marketplace, not of ideas, but of conduct. This is the marketplace of conduct. So you don't meet conduct with a counter argument. You call out very clearly and unequivocally immoral conduct, evil conduct, which is what we've been seeing. And that's what's needed. That's what's required. And if you're going to be a coward in the face of that or make excuses for that, I think that needs to be confronted and called out too. Now, I will say there are, I think, a lot of good-natured people sort of caught in the middle, especially as it revolves around issues with the Middle East. And I don't cast aspersions equally across the board. I'm very discerning when it comes to like the different actors involved. I don't like to use anti-Semitism lightly or attribute it, because if you're going to use that kind of language, like you're really getting into questioning what's going on internally with people. And I don't really like to do that. Like you can't really tell someone what's in their own soul and what they feel, but you can judge actions and conduct. And so I draw distinctions between people who are ignorant and people who are hateful. There's a difference between the nefarious actors pushing dangerous pathologies willfully, between what Tucker's doing and Candace is doing, versus I'd say Rogan or even someone like a Theo Von, who I think has been subjected to a lot of manipulation, and therefore, as an empathetic person, sees a bunch of footage from overseas and has a warped narrative and reality about what's going on. And so I just think there's people that you can actually reason with and persuade, and they've just been given wrong information. And the problem is that they're very popular and have huge audiences. Everybody's stupid at times or ignorant at times or has something wrong, but it's not that consequential because they don't have a massive audience that it spreads to if you get something incorrect, and I think people sometimes confuse ignorance in the form of someone who might have a huge audience and they might not understand something or get it wrong or misperceive, and they might be even giving into certain tropes that they might not even be aware of. And because there's a huge audience and it's consequential, we tend to attribute malice to that. And that's not quite the same as, say, what Tucker or Candace is doing.
Yeah, no, you kind of touched on something that I hate. I hate this. And I keep hearing it all the time. Like, you got to starve the grift. And I talk about this a lot. And I understand where some people come from. They're like, well, look, if you just ignore Candace or you ignore Tucker or you ignore whatever it is, like, it'll just go away. And I can't be more adamant that is utter nonsense. That's how you let things grow. That's like seeing that there's a forest fire starting right there and you just cover your eyes. I think it's really important and more important now than ever, because like social media, whether you like it or not, is kind of the front line of what's happening. And it is so influential. And there's so many people out there. I think what we definitely need to do is make sure there's more people out there calling these things out. And I do think that if people would have been attacking the lies that Candace was spreading back in September and October, I don't think she would ever got to the point where she is now. And Tucker's the same way. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's tricky because I hear what you're saying, and I tend to take that approach that it's rather convenient to just ignore it because it means you don't have to do the difficult things sometimes to confront people that you may have had relationships with or been in good standing with at one point in time. And a lot of people on the right just don't want to look like a leftist, so they won't call anything out because, God forbid, they should be perceived as a cancel culture liberal. But we don't like make decisions and form opinions and judgments based on even personal relationships. If your responsibility to your audience as a commentator is to tell the truth. And so the issue on the one hand, I think Candace is such a creature of provocation that, it's an interesting thought experiment. If she talked about the Jews in an episode and no one in the Jewish community or no institution reacted at all, if no one said a thing, would she stop talking about it? Probably, because I think in her case, it's not even just ideology, but it's more attention, clicks, self-aggrandizement. That's what, and provocation. She admitted in an episode with Tim Dillon, she was like, you know why we kept talking about Brigitte Macron? I mean, we were only going to do one episode on it, but it got such a reaction from the French government that we just kept going. So I wonder if that had happened. But at the end of the day, I think she's pathologically looking for that reaction. And so that's why the goalposts keep moving. If you remember, right after Charlie Kirk was killed, she said, the only people who can get me to stop are my husband and Erica Kirk. So if she says stop, I'll stop. Erica tells her to stop. I will stop lying. I'll stop lying, which is kind of a weird admission. But she just keeps moving the goalposts. And now, when Ben said to Megan, she's...
Oh, wait, hold on, just to frame this correctly, because if not, we're going to get hit. She said she changed Erica Kirk from saying to stop lying, and I haven't been lying, so I don't need to stop.
Right.
Like, she reframed that completely, and her audience was like, yep, that makes sense.
Right on. I will stop lying, and I haven't been lying, so why would I? So it's a whole... That's the trick. She just kept moving it. And I remember even when Ben was quick to this and called it out to Megan to her face and said that what she was doing coming after Erica, she's like, I didn't see that at all. She didn't do that at all. And so I think Megan's just like, shoot, I already dug my heels in, so I'm just going to go all the way with this and hope it blows over. I think she knows she's screwed because, she's really compromised her integrity on this. To want to die on this hill of defending Candace Owens or not, properly calling out awful conduct that she would, if somebody else was doing this to Erica, my God, every Megyn Kelly episode would be about it. Maybe every Tucker episode would be about it. But for some reason, they won't do it. So, it's convenient to say we shouldn't give these people attention. Well, yeah, because maybe Tucker wrote the forward in your book, or maybe you had him on speaking engagements and he's been in your podcast. I get it. For years and years and years, Tucker built up a lot of good rapport and relationships with tons of people in conservative media. Like, he didn't with me. I didn't come from that world. So I'm sort of understanding, and I'm a little bit gracious to that. If you've run organizations with a Candace, I think that's why Charlie couldn't do it. I think for him, he had blind spots to what Candace was becoming and then eventually became, and what Tucker became and was becoming and eventually became. I mean, if Charlie came back tomorrow and took a look at Candace Owens' last months of episodes, how would he feel about her? But in public, he refused to condemn her. He wouldn't do that. I think he had a principled stance when it came to friendships, that if I have a personal relationship with somebody, I will never condemn them on camera. I'll text them, I'll call them, whatever. But eventually it reaches a friction point because you're representing a movement and you're putting on massive conferences and debates that involve a lot of people. And so I think even Charlie, because he had blind spots for personal friendships, couldn't see what was going on to the right of him. He only focused so exclusively on what was going on to the left of him. And a lot of these people took advantage of that. And I think in response to pressure from friends and donors and people who were like, hey, look at what Tucker's becoming. Don't you see that? I think his response was, now I'm going to book him more because you've pressured me. And I think he developed this instinct against the left of doing the exact opposite. And he always came out successfully doing that he applied that, I think, in the wrong way when pressure came from people towards the right of him who were in his corner, but we're saying these people are going to weaken your movement. They're going to weaken your values, your message, not just on Israel, but on all of these things. And that's exactly what Tucker, post Charlie Kirk being killed, did. He had on Nick Fuentes. He had on all the people that Charlie was so vehemently against. And Tucker invited them on. And look at what Candace has done to his legacy, his family, his friends, his widow. I mean, it's unbelievable. So if Charlie came back tomorrow and took a snapshot when everyone's like, oh, these people are the ones speaking truth for Charlie and having his back. If he came back tomorrow and took a look around, who would he side with? I think the answer is obvious. Yeah. So you got to call him out.
I agree. Yeah. So, my take on this, where I kind of see the trajectory, and you touched on this earlier, and that was like, I don't know what these people's motivations are. I don't know what Candace's motivations. I think I understand Candace's motivations more than I do others. I think ultimately this started off as just spite, hatred, revenge, and she thrives on influence. Like you said, she definitely thrives on controversy as well. But I think ultimately what she gets off on is influence. And she saw that there was a vast majority, and I think a lot of them came from the left. And also I do think there was other elements of this that were helping her. But when it comes to Tucker and some of these other ones, I don't know exactly whether it's, we want to say Tucker's paid by Qatar. I don't know that. I don't know. I have some other theories on that as well. But what I do see is I try to look at the trajectory of what they're doing and what they're saying. And what I think, and I keep calling this Project 2032, because I think there's this element on the right that is extremely isolationist, that is anti-Semitic, and they're trying to undermine the Trump administration, and they want them to lose the midterms. And, you said this earlier, they may not be able to win a general election right now, but it doesn't take much to lose a midterm. And all they got to do is demoralize enough people. And if they lose if the Republicans lose the midterm, Trump is a lame duck president. He's going to be impeached again. And most likely we will end up losing the 2028 election. And I think what they're trying to do is create this new party on the right so that they can be in opposition to the left in 2028. And ultimately, they're going to try to create a new version of the Republican Party, a lot like MAGA did. They want to usurp MAGA and try to create this new party where they are now the opposition party, and then they want to win in 2032. And the thing is, even if they don't win, what they'll end up doing is they'll create a third party that will ensure that the Republicans will not win. And now they're going to go for, 4 years down the road.
That's why you say 2032. I think that's right. I think in Tucker's case, there's clearly like a political motivation going on where this new party is not even in opposition to the left, but rather an alternative to the left, because it's got a lot of left-wing elements in it. It's like this economic populism and mixed with social conservatism. So they definitely don't like the trans stuff on the left, the gay stuff on the left. They want to toss out and put in some, I don't know, Christian nationalist family value type thing, but paired with an economic leftism, populism, protectionism kind of thing. Yeah. And so there is a political element there when it comes to Tucker and having that kind of influence and impact. I do think that's correct. And I think it's a combination of also his grievances with establishment media, whether it's a falling out with Fox and his old colleagues and establishment there, and then a competition with new media. That's why he tried to delegitimize the Daily Wire as some Zionist Israeli outfit, even though the only Jewish host there is Ben Shapiro. Everyone else is Catholic or Christian. So that's kind of funny. But he was trying to position them there as being anti-American. Ben Shapiro doesn't even care about this country at all. Like at all. He doesn't care. He clearly doesn't care. It's disgusting, and I hate it. And that's and the real mystery is why he's just been making all sorts of excuses and evasive maneuvers for Islamic fundamentalism, radical Islam, saying for Hamas, from what I understand, they're a political organization. I don't know if that's true, by the way, that they're a terrorist organization. I mean, that to me is just baffling. But I think it's a way to create a lot of confusion in young Western minds and young American minds to say, if I can tell you that you've been lied to, if I can black pill you, if I can not just get you to take a red pill, but take the whole bottle, then you're disoriented again. You're confused. You don't trust the neoconservative, old legacy conservatives. You don't trust even MAGA anymore. That's betrayed you. That's been captured by the Israel lobby, by the Jewish lobby, by AIPAC, by the neocons. I'm your new savior. I'm the future that can actually, that can tackle the left socially and give you the protection and recognition that you need economically. And I do think that's what Tucker's doing. Candace, I think, is after the fame. I think she'd have no problem turning on Tucker again. She'd have no problem becoming a Zionist again if it suited it, turning on the church, turning on her friends, turning on her family for the sake of fame. Fame is the ultimate North Star for her. It's been very evident and clear. That's why, she's adopted any sort of persona she needs to in order to do that. And uses the same tactics each time of manipulation, manipulative language. And she does, and that's the ultimate driving force, combined with maybe a borderline personality disorder. I don't know, but that's what I think is going on with her. And I think there's other fat people who are just using the vacuum in Charlie Kirk's death of all these young, impressionable minds to just gain clicks and audience, like the sort of fascistic, like, neo-Nazi, right-wing Myron Gaines types, or the Fresh and Fit guys, Nick Fuentes types, who are trying to build their own coalition around these lost young people who are like, these guys have balls. They're edgelords. They'll say the thing you can't say. Meanwhile, they're all like a bunch of single, unmarried guys without families and no prospects. And so it's a weird person to admire if you're a young man, which is what I say to gropers when I see them. It's like, you want to be an alpha. You want to get a family and a woman and, be attractive on the mating circuit. And you're following guys who have none of that. Like, they have no families, they have no life, no job, no orientation. And all you do is demonize successful Jews all day. It's very odd. So, yeah.
No, I agree. Mm-hmm. And, there is a strategic element of this whole thing where we need to break ties with Israel that we can get into a little bit. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what's going on with Russia. Why do you think Russia suddenly, Candace Owens is a darling of Russia and is now going to, and I've talked to our audience a little bit about BRICS. People don't understand what BRICS is. They don't understand what the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum actually is. Give me your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, it's a little above my pay grade, but in terms, in terms of influence and dominance, regional dominance, Russia and America have this interesting relationship, from what I understand, in terms of we're not allies, we're not enemies, we're adversaries. But there's an old Soviet tactic that's been employed for years and decades in terms of using propaganda, utilizing technology, and utilizing ways in which, if you can't beat an enemy or a foe militarily, what you can do is you can turn the population against itself, and they'll do the work for you. You can fund radical movements. You can fund propaganda campaigns to turn America against itself. And that's what, China, Russia, the adversaries of the United States that want to see America weakened, that want to see American hegemony and influence weakened, need to do. You can turn the population against itself, make the electorate confused, demoralized, and that's how you can win. And it's pretty effective. I mean, even the term anti-Zionist, I think, comes from an old Soviet, has old Soviet roots, in a way that you can make anti-Semitism post-World War II like palatable again. we create this term called anti-Zionism. Oh, I'm not against Jews. I'm just against the Jewish state. And we can throw all the same kinds of language, the same kinds of temperament, the same flavor of anti-Semitism, but tuck it into anti-Zionism. And then you could talk about the Zionist rats, the dirty, dirty Zionists that are controlling our government. It's all the same exact playbook, but you change one word and you can get away with it. So there's been a lot of that has a lot of Soviet underpinnings from my understanding.
No, it does. And the thing is like people don't understand what they're advocating for and ultimately what Candace Owens is participating in. And I do. I think she's a useful idiot to the Soviets. I think she's the perfect mark. There's somebody like, what? Candace, we think you're great. We think you're awesome. You are the voice of America. We love you to come over here. And, they're going to sell around the idea like, we want to help you help your country. And, what people understand is like, they're trying to implement BRICS, folks. They're trying to replace the US dollar for the global standard. And if that happens, you think $5 gas is bad. Wait till it's $20. Wait till we don't have the influence, the economic might, the military might that we have in the world. This is all part of a multi-layered game to undermine and ultimately destroy the United States, at least bring it down to a point where we're no longer the superpower in the world. We don't have the influence and the ability, whether it's military capabilities or economic capabilities, that hold back the evils of the world, the people that want to take away your freedoms, whether it's China, Russia, Iran, and many other, Brazil. All of these people, they want to gang up on the United States to try to bring us down. And unfortunately, I think the entire Democratic Party wants this as well. They think that the United States is founded, we're evil. All we do is take advantage of everybody in the world. We should not have the power and influence that we have. And this ultimately is what Candace Owens is over there participating in. Whether she realizes it or not, I'm not sure.
Well, how did Russia know how to do it? How did they know how to woo Candace Owens? It's easy. It's the exact same playbook that the conservative media circuit did when they said, wow, Candace, you're great. You're a firebrand. You're speaking truth to power. You're saying the things you can't say. We're going to give you a platform. We're going to make you huge. We're going to amplify your voice. Oh, Russia said, we do the same thing that did over there back in the conservative. You tell her she's great. You tell her she's amazing. We give her the proper praise and she becomes our tool at our disposal. And they're just kind of almost imitating the playbook, word for word in terms of giving her what she just loves to hear, So, and I think that's exactly what's happening again in this second round. It's just the same exact thing, the same exact playbook that we saw the first time or the second time, whatever cycle that's in Candace's sort of game in her playbook. There's a very specific MO that's just rinse and repeat.
Yeah, like she's never given us a single original political philosophy or anything else. And you're absolutely right. What she's done from the very beginning is she put on a conservative skin suit because it was, and then all she did was parrot what all these other guys were already saying, what Ben Shapiro was saying, what Charlie Kirk was saying. And because, she was a female Black conservative, it was interesting. We wanted that voice on our side, quite frankly. It was marketable. And now that seems to be losing its shine. Now we're turning into something else. But she's a salesman. She's a salesman for hire. And whatever will get her the best commission, the most influence and power, that's what her currency is.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. She had skills and abilities and unfortunately zero principles. So, and under the guise of being the most principled, just remember it's all projection, So that's what I've seen.
More. I got a quick video.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan Bongino was on fire today, and we'll play a little bit of this. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Loser zero of a brother. Their daddy's probably looking down in disgrace that they spawned these two losers. But he decides to go on a show and gets all cute with his social media people. Again, with the Epstein and the Jews and all this stuff. This is just their entire life, which is kind of weird because his buddy, Tucker's buddy, who were both Nepo babies themselves, Hunter Biden, they were buddies? If there was ever an Epstein class of people, it's these two. It's these two whose entire lives, the little bosom buddies. Hunter Carlson, the tag team, like the Road Warriors in the WWF or something, like a little tag team. They slap each other off. Are like two little Nepo babies who've never earned a single thing in their entire life. Little bums, losers. And Tucker's his brother Fuckley Buckley is, Fuckley? He's another one. A little Nepo baby bum. What does he do exactly? So they decide to go on the show and bring the little surrogate, Jimmy Doof, in there. And of course, they have to bullshit you again. So I'll show you some receipts to show you how Tucker's just making this up. Because he just needs, again, Tucker wants to make sure, and these people, that maximum chaos results and that this kind of stuff happens at Turning Point. Not that we focus on what's going on in geopolitics, the economy, the government cleanup happening now, none of that.
Our previous interview, the future that I imagine.
Oh, Milk Bar TV, great. He's been on the show. I think.
Oh yeah,
live. Check this out.
My view is you can kind of tell who's telling the truth. You can smell it.
You've been talking on your show about whether Trump is the Antichrist.
I have not said that.
On your show, you said, could this be the Antichrist?
I actually did not say, could this be the Antichrist?
Could this be the Antichrist?
I don't know where that comes from, but I know that those words never left my lips.
Raised some eyebrows this week when you said that Hamas is more like a political organization than a terror group.
Hamas is a group of jihadis. They're Islamic extremists, which they also claim constantly. Which I don't know if that's true. By the way, it seems more like a political organization.
I didn't say that.
The future that I imagine is not a future in which we're yelling at each other about race. It's a future in which people are legitimately revolutionary, maybe even violent.
You said in our previous interview, the future that I imagine is not a future in which we're yelling at each other about race. It's a future in which people are legitimately revolutionary, maybe even violent.
I'm amazed that you have a tape of me saying that, and I just want to disavow it. A lot of young men in America, mostly white, but not exclusively, listen to Nick Fuentes really carefully. This kid is the single most influential figure among young white men, and not just white, actually. Is that true? Well, it's definitely true.
Of course, half the thing was about Fuentes and who cares? Fuentes?
There was a lot of Fuentes.
Who cares about Fuentes? Talk about irrelevant.
America's supporting Israel because it's an ally.
I don't even know what those words mean. I'm just saying principle.
They're an ally, right? I mean, they both.
I don't know what that means to be an ally.
Qatar is one of our closest allies in the world. The largest American air base in the Middle East is in Qatar. They're a close ally of ours.
I come to Israel and the infrastructure we're flying in, and I said to my buddy, I was like, man, first of all, looks great. I love the agriculture in Israel because it's beautiful. I love green. I love plants.
I remember when it didn't look like that.
Yeah.
First time I came in 53 years ago.
It's great.
Israel, which is one of the single ugliest countries in the world. Nothing of beauty has been built there since 1948. Sorry, I've been everywhere in that country, and it's true.
Let me get to the nub of the question, since again, a lot is at stake. A lot of money is at stake. Land is very valuable. Israel has a lot of resources. We have a huge country. This is a country the size of New Jersey with no resources.
An attack on Western civilization looks like this. It's tribalism. It's identity politics. It's DEI. It's whatever. It's Zionism. It's any belief system that begins with the understanding that one group is morally superior to other groups.
Well, just on principle, every other group in the world has the right to its own homeland except white people. What?
JD has been subject to, this is well known, but I'll just confirm it, nonstop treachery.
Accusing people of treachery. So I'm wondering, who do you mean specifically?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never worked there. So if you don't work there, you can say, you can say what you think you know, but it's hard to really know.
If I was telling my kids, if you think someone's lying to you, you're right.
Boom.
Shout out to Nathan Livingstone.
Oh, Milk Bar.
Go freaking follow him if you're not. If you haven't watched our interview with Nathan, make sure you go watch that as well. But how do you explain that to us? Oh, and by the way, do you have a Dan Bongino impression? Because if you don't, you need to get one real quick.
I think I do.
Oh.
I think I do. I just watching that. I'm looking at it. I'm thinking, what's Gary doing? How many guns does he have? How many does he need? Got a rifle behind you, tough guy? Huh? Think you're a tough guy? How's that? Just literally right off, hot off the press. Never done it before.
I like that. There you go, folks.
He's sitting there with his little Nepo baby, fucker Tucker Carlson. That's what he's doing. That's what he's doing. I mean, those words have never actually uttered my lips at all. I mean, Milk Bar. I don't know what Milk Bar is. Is that like Milky Way? Is that like our planets? Is that outer space? I mean, is it Elon Musk? I mean, clearly he's demonic. Clearly I don't even know who that person was on screen. That could have been AI. It could have been two different people. I'm actually a triplet. Those are my two twins, though that wasn't me at all. Like at all. I'm actually a triplet. And so whoever Nate Livingston is, he definitely obviously found my two twins as part of our triplet set. And you can ask my father, who was in the CIA, by the way, he was. And that's what that was. So I have two triplet brothers, and they say a lot of shit. And it's nonsense. And I agree, totally agree. And I've never said that. And I don't have any brothers. What do you make of that? Listen, that's the trick with Tucker Carlson. Like, I've seen Jewish institutions that like label him an anti-Semite, but you can't quite do that. It does a disservice, not because he doesn't traffic in it, but he'll never explicitly say, I hate Jews. But he will allow a permission structure for those that do hate Jews to flourish. And it's really not what he says and what statements he makes. It's what he doesn't say, what he leaves out, what he contradicts with. He'll say one thing to one person. He'll say he loves Israel in one episode and he detests it in the other. So he's really an agent of confusion. That's the intentional confusion. That's clearly what goes on here, and deception. So that's, I think, the type of conduct you have to address, like very specifically what the tactic is. It's what I try to do also when I'm doing the shtick. But it's like, and what Nate does in the compilations is showing you exactly the conduct and the tactics employed by Tucker and what he's doing.
Yeah, I follow Tucker. There was two people that I followed, watched their podcasts every single day, and one I still catch pretty regularly. That's Joe Rogan. The other one was Tucker Carlson. Love Tucker. And it wasn't, and I started seeing, it was after the Putin, it was during the Putin interview that I was like, this is just weird.
Yeah.
Like this seems odd to me that we're not, at least I understand the history of Russia. I understand what's going on there now. And for you not to point out like what happens to dissidents and to just completely glaze Putin and Russia while you're there, I saw as a little bit disingenuous. But look, I like Tucker, so I'm going to let that slide. Maybe that's his blind spot. I don't know. We all have blind spots. But then things continued to progress. And I'll never forget, it was the Charlie Kirk Memorial where he gets up there and he talks about, like, I don't know, maybe there's some guys in the back room, eating hummus, and they decide that Charlie Kirk just isn't useful anymore. And I was just sat there, mouth agape, aghast. But it wasn't then. It was like 2 days later when people were starting to hold him to task on that. It was like, you said that the Jews killed Charlie Kirk. He's like, I wasn't talking about Jews or Israel. What are you talking about? Like, no, they're like, okay, I guess everybody just sits in the back room and eats hummus while they're lighting cigars off of a menorah. That was where I was like, oh, I'm done with this guy. This guy is a liar. He's disingenuous. Like, I don't know what's happened to him, but something's happened. And what do you think caused that switch that we saw so quickly?
Again, with Tucker, it was pretty surprising that he would go that way. But I mean, for people who've worked with him and known him longer, I think Ben cited an interview he did well before October 7th, where Tucker started to show signs of pivoting on being a real true conservative and being against certain real principles that were classically conservative. But I think it ultimately was the first step in creating a wedge issue in a way to weaken the evangelical base in this country. So if you look at the sort of the scheme, if in the United States, in the Republican base, you have a large evangelical Christian base that it gets its support from, and that's a largely pro-Israel Christian Zionist base, I have to weaken that, and I can use the younger generation of people to do that. So I have to drive a wedge first between Israel and the United States, because these groups, I can say these are evangelicals, they're boomers, they're neocons, they don't have your interest, they're Christian Zionists. So first, post-October 7th, let's drive a wedge issue between Israel and the United States. Even in the way he spoke about October 7th, literally on the 8th, he was like, I mean, it was terrible what happened to them, but I don't want to get involved. Like, forget what the American policy is going to be on Israel. That's a strange thing to say the day after, while they're still counting bodies in communities in Israel, to say, like, leave me out. Like, you wouldn't come. you know, you wouldn't go to the funeral of someone who just died and then start saying, by the way, I just so you know, like, I'm not really like, you know, I'm not going to support or pay for the funeral costs or anything. Like, I don't want to be involved. You know, it's just, it's a strange posture. It was like, huh? It was eyebrow raising. And so I think it was a way to say, like, where can I find my influence and build my audience? I can create this wedge issue, but first I have to destroy the foundations, weaken them, erode them. I have to weaken the Christian Zionist base, that evangelical base, and that centers around the U.S.-Israel relationship. That's a big one. And then I can start to play with certain theological things, and all the things that we kind of understood as threats to the West, like radical Islamic terrorism, I can sort of soften and say it's complicated. I can play to the sort of isolationist libertarian side that claims that all of the hostility towards the West comes from our actions. It's our imperialist hegemony that causes people in the East to hate us, that causes people to go on buses and blow themselves up or fly planes into towers. It's because of our actions. We bring it upon ourselves. So I can use the sprinkling of that. And eventually you sort of weaken the younger generation in their faith and trust in the classic conservative institutions.
What do you think is the goal? You know,
no, like that's right. Yeah, as we said, I think form a whole new political coalition.
Okay. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't think that Tucker's grifting right now. I think for the first time ever, he's not grifting. I think what we've seen at Tucker for the last 20 years has been the grift. He was controlled. He knew that he needed to appeal to a conservative audience. And, you know, we've even seen glimpses of that. We've seen some text messages of Tucker saying that, you know, he hated Trump and some other things that were going on there.
Right.
But I think for the first time, you know, he leaves Fox. He starts his own network. He's now selling millions of dollars worth of, you know, nicotine pouches. Yeah. So I think for the first time he has the freedom. You know, he's you know, financially set. He has the freedom to really do and say whatever he wants. And I think for the first time that, you know, we're seeing the true Tucker. This is the Tucker that has been behind the scenes the entire time, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, he is also just that disingenuous and dishonest. I remember, I think somebody pointed out to me, maybe it was Karis Ray, who talked about his Kanye interview in which he willfully either cut out a segment or kept in a segment, but in a way where he presented it as the most reasonable, truth-telling mind of our generation, but he knew that he wasn't. He knew that Kanye wasn't well, was erratic, and like cut and manipulated interviews in order to present a very different thing. So he's been playing that game for a long time. I mean, I'm also curious, like in your circles, when you see, you know, you probably run into this more than I do, in terms of like people falling for some of these pathologies, whether it's around, you know, I think some of the conversation around the U.S.-Israel relationship and the strategic alliance gets muddled into this to the point where when people have questions or curiosity, and, you know, we are two distinct different countries. Israel and the United States are different countries. Israel faces existential threats in a different way than the United States does. And there's a difference between Israel's existential threat and the U.S. strategic interest, different stakes, but they could be aligned. They could diverge at times. When you come across people who are like, yeah, but, you know, it's, you know, Tucker plays on that question. He plays on that ignorance or curiosity. So what have you seen in you know, in your circles in regards to that? And how do you push back on it?
I don't think that a lot of people really understand our relationship with Israel. And I think like me, so for instance, you know, I grew up, I guess, a Zionist, pro-Jew. I grew up in I was raised United Pentecostal, like we were core church, and there was a lot of, you know, our pastor would go to Israel on a pretty regular basis. So I always had a positive outlook on Jews, Israel, but I really didn't get into the politics of it, even when I was in the military. And I got to be honest with you, like during the Charlie Kirk assassination, somehow really quickly, like all of these Jewish and anti-Israel tropes were getting conflated and pushed into the discussion more than I'd ever seen. And I wasn't comfortable with it, but I was also kind of indifferent to Israel. I am somebody that believes like we probably spend too much money overseas. We probably spend too much money. And I also worked for the Department of State for some time. I was traveling overseas. I saw what was going on, especially during the Biden administration. You know, Trump lost the election. I'm traveling, and now I see, you know, LGBTQ flags right underneath the American flag at every embassy and consulate. And I also saw that there was clear, once Biden was in office, you know, where they were pushing the LGBTQ initiatives onto all these other countries. Like, hey, you know what? By the way, we'll pay for your roads. We'll provide you security. We'll give you wells and infrastructure. But this is what you got to do. And you know, they were kind of pushing all those into there. But when it came to Israel, I was kind of indifferent. And when this discussion really started getting pushed one way or the other. I was like, you know what? I need to figure out the truth behind this.
Mhm.
And so I started looking at first. I was actually kind of in a friendly relationship with, for instance, Ian Carroll, and I knew the things that he'd been saying. So I started watching some of his videos, and the first thing that I did was as he's laying things out. And by the way, folks, any Ian Carroll video, we'll skip to the end. It's because of the Jews, every single video. So I started listening to the things that he was saying about the Schofield Bible. I already kind of knew a little bit about the history of the Schofield Bible, but this was like a Israel-Jew plot, really a Jewish plot at the time. Israel wasn't existing. But I started researching every element of these different videos, and it's like, that's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. And behind every single one of these, whether we're talking about a relationship with Israel in the current state, our relationship militarily with Israel, I started realizing that it was just lie after lie after lie. And then I started seeing the benefit of what's going on. And I just took from my own experience. I know Jews. I've never met someone that I didn't like because they weren't because they were, or I knew Jews that they're not out taking advantage of. And one of the things that just came common sense, when you have 0.2% of the population, and like you said, so philosophically, politically diverse, I believe that 0.2% of the population controls the entire world, controls the U.S. The idea that Trump is controlled by Bibi Netanyahu, I just reject that out. You guys are I don't know, mutants. You're like the super race. To be that small of a population and control so much of the world, pretty unbelievable. I'm ready to convert, as a matter of fact, just influence and power and the riches. I'm joking, folks.
Did you hear that, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Head over there. Head over there. Yes.
I think ultimately people's ignorance and everybody in the United States grows up with a little bit of anti-Semitic murmur in the background. And hear these little tropes here and there. And I think that so there's a little bit of conditioning over most Americans' time. And especially if you're on the left, it used to be kind of rejected on the right, but except for the extreme right. And there's a whole thing with horseshoe theory that I do think we got to horseshoe turn into a circle real quick. But I think that's ultimately what a lot of people in the military, they just don't we're indifferent to Israel. Or at least most of us were for a really long time. And now there is, I do see guys getting sucked over into this and saying, Israel's controlling everything. And then I see people like me that take the time to research this stuff. Folks, by the way, if you're not following Green Beret Nap Time, he has a YouTube channel, another fellow Green Beret. He does a great job explaining our relationship, both military and from a financial and fiscal perspective, and how much we benefit with our relationship with Israel. That's the other thing too, Ami, is that these tropes are easy to say, and to disprove them takes 10 times the effort and the time to kind of go through and no, this is not true, and here's why it's not true. And most people aren't even interested in that.
I've seen, to me, I've sort of shifted for a while after a while, it gets exhausting to sort of try to prove who's hateful, who's not hateful, especially after sort of the left really overplayed the racism card to use it at everything. I think a lot of times people falsely today throw the anti-Semitism card into that, so that if you just hear the word or any accusation of any kind of bigotry, there's just this eye roll that happens. All right, I don't want to hear it. It's been cried wolf too many times. But I've shifted focus into just proving what's true and not true, because oftentimes if you actually see these guys confronted, or see an Ian Carroll confronted with counterfactuals to his claims, they buckle very, very quickly. So to me, as exhausting as it might be, and like you said, I think one of the reasons we were talking about earlier, why this stuff spreads so rapidly on social media is there's no standards for a lie. Nothing is required to lie. You can just say a bunch of things a bunch of times, and if it's sensational and censorious and gets clicks, it will spread. But in order to prove something true, you have standards, evidence, all these kinds of things that you have to make a case for. And so it's stacked against you to try to compete with the onslaught of lies. You could say 10 lies for one truth, but I think it's still worth the fight, because ultimately, if you actually push back on this, a lot of times if people hear a bunch of claims and then point their fingers and say, anti-Semite, hateful, people say, hey, wait a minute, you're trying to shut him up. You're trying to cancel the guy. You're trying to shame him. Why not just and granted, not every claim is worth a response until those claims become so mainstreamed and accepted that eventually you kind of have to. I don't think flat Earth needs to be really debated unless like thousands and thousands of people started all of a sudden thinking the Earth was flat or building bridges that collapsed. Like if it had real consequence in the culture, in the body politic, in the conversation, you probably have to address it and then just demonstrably prove why it's not true. So you have to just assess those points. But I think focusing on what's true and not true, and like you said, doing the research and saying, oh, everything Ian Carroll said here is just completely fabricated, then I think that's ultimately the most effective thing for those people that actually value and care about the truth and not just the narrative or the sensational story.
That's one of the things that I try to do every time. Every time that I believe something, like I go out and I try to prove it wrong. I want to hear the counter argument to that. And I just don't think that a lot of people do that. And they have these sacred cows that they believe. They don't even know why they believe them. A lot of people can't even go back and really explain. It's just like Israel's evil. They control Trump. They control the US. They killed Kennedy. I don't know. They killed Charlie Kirk. But they don't have any foundation. It's like, go and try to prove some of those things wrong and really look at what the opposition says. And then, like you said, like you gotta weigh this with evidence and logic here, and what makes sense, what doesn't, and what is supported by fact, and what is just people repeating a lie until we all believe it. The other thing I think that's interesting going on right now is how we've moved away from the term Jew, and now it's been replaced with Zionist. I know those have always kind of been linked, obviously, but I think there's a real effort here, and I hope people are paying attention to the information op, the PSYOP, whatever you want to call it, because now it's not. If you're an American, according to the Ian Carrolls and all these other people of the world, if you're an American and you just believe that Israel has the right to exist, not only are you a Zionist and you're just as bad as the Jews, but you're actually Israel first. So what they've done is they've gotten rid of the term Jew, and they've lumped the Jews in, and anybody that supports Israel's right to exist. You're of the same equally terrible anti-American ilk, and I think they've done that more effectively than we give them credit for.
Yes, I mean they make you choose a false binary. If you have support for Israel, like you must be Israel first, as if there's only two options, as if people can't hold two simultaneous values at the same time, or have a hierarchy of values in which they care about the United States. They also care about Israel in different orders and varying degrees and varying orders. But at the end of the day, if they were truly American, the beautiful thing about America is that we all have the right to live according to our own values, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what that means is that I can value all sorts of different things, and provided I live and not violate the rights of others to live according to their values, that's American. That's what it means to be American. It doesn't have some sort of tribal claim of allegiance onto you. You don't have a sworn allegiance to the country as much as the country has an allegiance to protect your ability to live in it freely. That's what being American means. And so this whole idea of accusations of dual loyalty or America first versus Israel first, it's like, we live in a free country that allows all kinds of individuals and communities to thrive and exist and live freely according to their own values and their own structures of, are you married, kids? What's your situation, Gary?
Yeah, I'm married. I got 4 kids and a grandkid.
Okay. Are you your kids first or America first?
Oh, I'm my kids first.
Right. Everybody understands like hierarchies of values when you actually break it down. We have a hierarchy. I'm my wife and my children first, before Israel, before the Jews, before my own community. Like, bring it down. People value their own life the most. Probably it's their life. Outside of that, spouse, children, a family, extended family, community. And I think, people confuse this idea. There's a whole lot of confusion about like the way the Jewish relationship to Israel, especially like as a religious Jew, like the connection to Israel is a religious, spiritual one. I'm not an Israeli. I don't live there. Bibi is not my government, but Israel I consider holy and sacred and have a connection to it. And that's a spiritual, personal connection to it. And so I shouldn't be forced to choose between my religious, spiritual connections and values and my American values. In fact, America protects my ability to do that. That's what makes America amazing. We can have religious values, we can have personal values, and America protects our ability to express those and practice those without our loyalty being called into question. So people get the whole thing wrong. And so our government and our relationship to our government, I think a lot of people who try to make this claim, are you America first, Israel first, are actually just missing in their own lives, family, community, like a real sense of belonging. And the furthest thing from that they feel they need to latch onto is being a sort of American in a sort of paternalistic sense, because they're lacking church, God, family, community in their own lives at a personal level. And when you don't have that, you feel like America's being stripped away from you or distracted in foreign entanglements. And you feel like sort of like it's your family abandoning you. And you see people who are supporting such things as, like taking mommy and daddy out of the house and distracting them. And I need comfort and catering to. It's like, America's not going to give you those things. America's going to give you the ability to attain those things, and that's some of the work you got to do yourself. So don't blame Israel or the Jews or Bibi or Trump for your personal shortcomings, because ultimately America puts the responsibility on you to do that.
Yeah. It's not Israel's fault. It's not the Jews' fault that you're fat or poor. I promise you, it really isn't.
Yeah.
Going back to the opposite side of the false binary there, is, if you believe, one of the things that I noticed, and I started picking up on this like literally days after, as soon as Charlie Kirk was killed, suddenly we were flooded with all these ridiculous theories. And this is where I started getting real suspicious of what was taking place. And I was like, there's outside influence. Of course, there's grifters taking advantage of things that they're going to get views, clicks, and pushing salacious and sensationalism, all those things. But I started seeing something else like right off the bat. And I'm sure they exist, but you would think that believing that in some sort of conspiracy that Charlie Kirk was killed could be mutually exclusive to, not hating Israel. And they're, for some reason, those two, I've never seen those exist outside of each other. It's like, no. The Jews killed them. Like even if you think the CIA, like all of these people, if they believe there's some sort of conspiracy, TPUSA was involved, automatically, for some reason, these are inexorably linked, that the anti-Semitism, the anti-Zionism is always there. And that right off the bat, like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Right. You're like, so when you push back against the claim that Israel was involved, they're like, so you just believe the narrative? You believe the government?
You're paid by the Jews.
I'm like, so you just believe it's the Jews? That's the pushback. What's going on here is that people have decided and formed a conclusion already, regardless of evidence. So then they'll look for any pattern or anything that could suggest to prove their conclusion true. But they've already decided it's the Jews, Gary. They've already decided it's Bibi and it's Israel. And once you've formed a conclusion, you can find all sorts of pattern recognition to support said conclusion. But that's not how we come to the truth. We get to the truth by gathering evidence, by seeing where things point to, seeing where they lead to, what something suggests, what it points to, and then you form a conclusion. But these people have formed the conclusion already. It's the Jews. As Alex Jones said, Jews. That's what he said, Gary. It's the Jews, and people are just obsessed with Jews. And so they've already formed that conclusion. So they're going to look for it any which way. And if they find a cell phone with an Israeli address, they'll say, you see, because they've already formed a conclusion, which just gives their whole game away.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And they've come to a conclusion ahead of time, and now they're just looking for evidence. That's the back-asswards way to go about trying to find the truth. You look at the evidence, you see what's going on, and then you can kind of come to some educated conclusions. That's how logic and reason works, folks. And when they can't find evidence, they just make it up. And
Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is often the most likely. The alternative is far more unlikely, that there's some grand mass conspiracy that Israel would somehow be involved in somehow harming one of their biggest, most vocal proponents and supporters, the man holding it all together in the coalition, as we've seen, that was preventing a fracture from happening in the movement, that was holding a well of anti-Semitism from overflowing. He was trying to hold it back. Would that be like, so just think about it. Nothing could be further from the truth or likelihood.
That is crazy when you think about it now. Like, we didn't realize it then. We didn't realize what a bulwark Charlie Kirk was to the crazy right. Like, for whatever reason, as long as he was around, he was able to hold that back. I don't know why. I mean, you always had the Ian Carrolls, you had the Myron Gaines, but they were on such the periphery because of Charlie Kirk. It's like he had this force field that came with him that was able to insulate the saint among us. And
he did it rather like intentionally and willfully, making sure not to have Fuentes and Groyper types attending AmFest events. And if you notice, in the first AmFest without Charlie, they were everywhere. He was trying to, very intentionally keep them out. And I think Charlie's solution to all of that, moral decay and anti-Semitism on the rise that he was legitimately very concerned about, was to encourage these young men, or the people spreading this stuff, to look at themselves, get married, have kids, go to church, like improve their own lives. And that would sort of solve the anti-Semitism problem. So rather than focusing on the manifestations of hate and naming and shaming, he was really trying to encourage them out of it. And that was a big part of, I think, his mission. That would have been his mission, is to say, like, I think that's why he held like that. He had one of those, that piece he did where he sat down a bunch of people and said, how many of you just don't want to talk about Israel anymore, have exhaustion? Exactly. Can we focus on like America and find, like, there's nothing hateful about that. He was sort of trying to give them permission out of this brain rot, where he saw it coming. And, we've seen what his so-called friends have done since his death. And by friends, I mean the Tuckers and the Candaces and the Megans of the world, what they've done since, in terms of, have they been following in his footsteps or doing the exact opposite? So
his best friend that can't produce a text message after 2019 for sure, was never once on his podcast, didn't go to his wedding,
or funeral or private ceremony. I mean, come on, people.
He didn't invite her to AmFest 2024 or 2025, whereas he personally invited Ben Shapiro to both. The FBI would call that a clue, but I know the FBI. But Fed slop. All right, let's jump in here and get some questions and comments.
It's the federal BB investigation. That's what it's called. The federal BB is exactly.
I'm going to take that comment. I'm pretty sure that's directed at me, but I'm sure we'll find someone that thinks you're handsome as well.
Take it.
DVJ says, love your content. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This was right at the beginning of the show. Gary's already cracking up, and we just getting started. Comedic relief is refreshing. It is like we needed to just wash our palate and have a good time tonight. Not talk.
Well, he's a great little ginger puff, Gary. We love a good redhead. We love that. He's got a natural red. I dye mine orange, and that's okay too. That's okay too. Thank you so much, Nicki. We love that. Nicki Minaj for freedom. We love that.
I didn't expect this may be my biggest interview, having Trump on the show.
Oh, I'm supposed to be at the Knicks game, but I said, you know what, Knicks, whatever. We don't need the Knicks. We're going on Dangerous Liberty because it's a dangerous time, and I've experienced that. I really have, and you know that.
So proud of you, Ami Kozak. You know what? I'm proud of you too, Ami. Like, getting out there and being able to deliver the message that you do, I think, is extremely important. So
that's Megan McCain, Megan J, a Jewish Megan, we call her. We love that.
Oh,
Megan J, Megan for the Jews.
There's medicine in mockery and truth in comedy. If we lose our sense of humor, we lose everything. Ami is a national treasure, a real mensch.
Amen. Very nice.
Still can't decide who's better, Tucker imitation, Nick Mattel, or Ami Kozak. We just had Nick Mattel on the show the other night. What a great time. I think he spent some time with you recently as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Nick's a friend. One of the best. He's getting into the trenches in the online Omegle sort of anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist universe, and he's just tackling them one by one. And the Tucker thing. I mean, he's sort of doing an Ami Kozak doing a Tucker, but we'll let him have it. We both have fun with it because I mean, I don't even know Nick Mattel at all, like at all. Nick Mattel, is that a type of martial arts? Mao Tao? I think Muay Thai, Mattel. I don't know, but it's China, and China's wonderful. Yeah.
Ami does a great Gal Sharpton. I haven't seen Nick. Gal Sharpton is Dr. Altoid's version of Candace Owens.
Oh, is that what they call Gal Sharpton? Well, I actually do a regular Al Sharpton too, so I don't know what kind of policy he's talking about, Dr. Outdoors. But Gal Sharpton, Candace Owens is all the different people. It's a little bit Cosby too, but there's a little Al Sharpton for you.
I'm still angry after last night's stream. I get it, Colton. I'm with you, buddy. Thanks for this. I unsubbed to Megan months ago. So disappointed in her. Theo is just a useful idiot for that side, so I don't listen to him anymore either. Keep up the good work. Love Ami's wigs. You know, I love Theo too, and I think Theo and I feel the same way about Sean Ryan. I think both of these guys are just easily influenced. We know that Theo Vaughn has been hanging out and being proselytized and brainwashed by Candace Owens. And I think he's just one of those guys you can sit down in front of you and just completely wipe his brain of whatever he had prior to your influence.
I feel like you could talk to Sean Ryan. You know, you're a military man. You could talk to him.
We could have a talk. We'd have a talk. I'm concerned about, again, used to like Sean Ryan a lot. I think that I think he's easily influenced. I think somebody's been put into his life, whether it's professionally or personally, that has completely changed his views on the world.
What's your take on some of these questions here, Gary? That's my Sean Ryan. He's talking back here, sitting back in a chair. Wow, it's crazy. Anyway,
I've talked about this before. I was like, Sean Ryan is the perfect podcaster because all he does is sit back and it just like he says, like, "Are you serious?
Are you serious right now?
Serious?
That's insane. Wow, that's crazy."
He says like 5 words the whole show.
Yeah, it's just like unbelievable.
He's a great interviewer. I just love how Candace went to Russia the same day Ukraine started bombing St. Petersburg, but she did an interview saying how amazing it was. And she brought her family there. And she wants to talk about, Erica Kirk not taking care of her family. That seems pretty wild. And I guess she left 2 of her younger kids here in the United States. I don't judge. To me, the strategy is clear. Get people on Trump's side, then convince them he is the devil so they do whatever he wants. I don't listen to Tucker anymore either. Tracy, thank you very much. Gifted 5 Paramount Tactical memberships. We appreciate you, Anna, paleontologist.
Dinosaurs never existed, by the way, like at all. And so
the way he seamlessly blends parody with commentary with a straight face is priceless and goes from one character to the next is pretty impressive.
No, thank you. I see her on Twitter all the time. No suit for Knowles. Is that a Michael? Yep. She's obsessed with Michael Knowles, I guess. Clearly, we're giving them all these attention. Clearly. That's all I could say is Michael Knowles.
Yeah, let me give her a shout out. So if you guys aren't following Britta, No Soup for Knowles on X, make sure you go follow Britta. She's amazing. DJ, this is from your crew over there.
Oh, nice.
Gary, if we're on the topic of Ukraine, the Ukraine Unmanned System Forces just released a wild video showing how good they're doing on X. I would like to see that. That's one of the things that I'm not convinced that we get a good picture of. I don't think we really know how well or how not so well Ukraine is doing versus Russia. It's pretty hard to kind of decipher. We get a lot of propaganda from both sides. Look, the U.S. definitely traffics in propaganda as well for different reasons. It is what it is.
What's your take, Gary, on when you see like clearly America and Israel in particular, having like such military superiority over the people they're fighting, and yet wars and conflicts drag on the way they do? I never know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of tech. I'm not a military tactician, so I just wonder what those complications can be in terms of like in warfare.
Yeah. So, I was with the initial push into Iraq and then went to Iraq again in 2008, went to Afghanistan. Look, I think there is the TTPs, tactics, techniques, and principles on which we operate and train, and then we get to a war zone. And in this case, and this is the problem, what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan shouldn't have happened. We should have not been there as long. What our military is trained for and capable of is what we saw in Venezuela. And so I think that's part of the problem. It's like people now say regime change, because I have spoken at length on how I think that it would be irresponsible if Trump doesn't defeat destroy and remove the IRGC from Iran for a lot of different reasons. But, you know, people say regime change, they think of these prolonged wars, they think of, you know, occupation. That is not what our military is actually built for. And what we can do is exactly what we saw in Venezuela. We can go in there, we can destroy what's happening in there. We can make sure that we lay the groundwork first, which Trump has done pretty well. He took out their Navy. He's been very strategic in this, and there's plans, folks. If you really understand what happens at DOD, what happens at the Pentagon, what happens with all the different intelligence that we're getting from, you know, the NSA, the DIA, the CIA, working with our partners like Israel to try to get a clear and complete intelligence package and understanding what's happening on the ground. Like, we could go in and take out the IRGC fairly quickly. There may require some boots on the ground, but we can also make sure that the citizens of Iran are armed and have the capacity to take their country back. So there's lots of options on the table. I think what we saw in the global war on terrorism was just an abuse for lots of reasons. And look, I think there's a lot of people on the ground that were like, hey, this is the way that we do this. There was new philosophies put into place, like coin operations, counterinsurgency operations, that I think were just really bad doctrine to begin with. And there was a lot of confusion of what to do and a lot of different motives. But one of the big motives, without a doubt, was there was lots of defense contractors and the military industrial complex were making a lot of money. And then a lot of politicians were making a lot of money. And there's a huge downstream of billions and billions of dollars on a yearly basis. And I think ultimately, you know, it was an abuse of the American people and our military in general. I don't think it was good policy. That doesn't mean that when we have Donald Trump, who isn't interested in these long drawn out wars, or is interested in, you know, necessarily regime change. I think he should be interested in defeating the IRGC and then let the Iranians determine their own future. So, you know, that's
in the Bush era. It was a lot of I think the objectives were flawed even to begin with. Forget just execution. It was like Operation Iraqi Freedom to spread democracy around the world, imposing it by force with these armies, and that required these long quagmires of entanglements, which just isn't in the interest of American self-defense. I think Iran is a different story, and just because, you know, it's like a doctor treating a patient. If you've been treating this area of the body and that actually isn't where the cancer is and the problem is, then that's a mistake and you may have done a lot of harm. But that doesn't mean if you find the real culprit of global terrorism and anti-Americanism and people who want to destroy America's allies, doesn't mean you ignore that. So it's like both things can be true. And I can understand the PTSD post-Iraq, of course, especially for someone like you who saw it firsthand. But I feel like today, you know, that doesn't mean discovering or acknowledging the real threat and the real problem and the real strategic interest should be ignored, you know? So
yeah, I think America has quite frankly forgotten how to win wars. Look, we haven't won a war since World War II, and you know, we ended up dropping 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We can go back and debate whether or not that was the right thing to do. But what I will say is that there was no people that we have ever seen in the last several hundred years that were more radical than the Imperial Japanese. And they take, you know, radical Islam, and it looks like, I don't know, the Boy Scouts in comparison. These people would have fought to the last person. And I think we understood, or the people then understood, like, if we don't use this new technology and you know, we used to believe that warfare was you fought and you killed until no one was willing to fight. And that's how we won. And then that's how you get unconditional surrenders. We've gotten to a point because of Vietnam, because media is in every single on every single battle space. We're now trying to mix diplomacy with war fighting, and I just don't think those two things can exist. You have one, and you win, and you defeat a foe, and then you can have diplomacy, start rebuilding those relationships. And we look back to everybody that we ever fought in World War II, and we have pretty good relationships with them now. And then we can look at what we tried to do. You know, we tried to impose, and speaking of Gad Saad, you know, we have suicidal empathy. I just got the book yesterday. I'm going to be reading it. But that's what we try to input, like this empathetic war. It's like, I'm all right, you attacked us, then we're going to attack you back. But, we're going to stop there. We're not going to take out your command structure. We're not going to kill anybody and everybody that's associated with this. We're trying to fight a war with kindness, and that's how you prolong war. You give them hope.
Yeah.
As long as you hope, they're going to be trying to kill you with roadside bombs.
Yeah, I've heard it said, peace is never achieved through negotiation. It's always achieved first through victory, then negotiation. You don't throw negotiation before victory, because if you compromise victory, then that's how you end up with these long on and again, off again, on again, off again entanglements that just never end. And you keep these, you incentivize these evil regimes to continue as opposed to being victorious. The goal of war is not negotiation, it's victory. That's, I think, what they've kind of lost, I think, in the West in its approach to war, and a lot of the sort of just war theory imposed into, and the doctrine you're talking about, that has a real effect, a detrimental effect on the ability to actually win decisively.
Yeah, the counterinsurgency doctrine that was created by General Petraeus was exactly that. It was like the idea here is that you have 10% on the other side, and then you got the 80% in the middle, and the 80% of the population are persuadable. And then you have 10% of the radical militant fighters that are unpersuadable, but then you have 10% at the very end that are also persuadable. And if you fight a kind war and you only target the 10%, the other 90% will end up in your back pocket. And that's not how it works, especially in the Middle East, where they only respect strength. And, so that's where we're at with all that. The thing that bugs me about Tucker, Candace, Megan is the time, and they all three flipped almost simultaneously, or is it just me misremembering? If not, why would they seemingly coordinate this flip? That's a good question for you.
I think it was Tucker and Candace were right around the same time for different reasons. If you recall, Tucker was sort of making his moves while Candace was, kind of on the max tension point with the Daily Wire over a bunch of things. A year earlier, she was defending Kanye West because, of course, her biggest coin in pop culture, her biggest advocate, Kanye West, she's never going to let that relationship go. So she was kind of defending his anti-Semitic comments on Twitter and stuff. And that was her first sort of hiccup with the Daily Wire, so to speak. But she was at a tension point there, and she had been peddling this stuff post October 7th, and Tucker was doing it too, but hers was sort of a way to kind of isolate herself out of the Daily Wire. It's not like it's coordinated between the two of them, but they were playing off of the same culture, the same environment in which they saw an opportunity. And Tucker was at that point saying how, because Ben was covering what happened on October 7th and expressing his sympathy and empathy for what happened and his pain, he was categorizing that and portraying that and mischaracterizing that as anti-American, as Ben wanting to send Tucker's kids to go die for Israel. That was Tucker's sort of evil first move. And I think when it all reached that sort of a threshold when, Ben was caught on camera saying how Candace was, somebody filmed, Ben saying how her faux sophistication, the thing she's doing is absolute nonsense. It's terrible. And he was criticizing her. And she took that opportunity to say, haha, see, they're just trying to cancel me and shut me up because I'm criticizing Israel. But, Tucker's a lot more shrewd than Candace is. He's a lot more careful, a lot more methodical. Candace, just trips over her own contradictions constantly. So if you recall, at first it was just about being critical of the Israeli government, or all genocide wherever it takes place should be condemned. I don't care what government does it. And then, look what she is now, holding up the Talmudic Jew, an old anti-Semitic diatribe in which she's claiming Jews are responsible for the slave trade. So she did a favor to all the people who called her and who she claimed falsely called her an anti-Semite. All these times she kept trying to defend herself as not anti-Semitic, even talking to me about it. And then she did them all a favor, giving them everything they wanted by becoming the very caricature that they claimed she was. So when I approached her in good faith and we had two conversations about it, I tried to say, maybe it's just ignorance and not hate, but, eventually you make your own bed there. And eventually you just you become you become what you are. What can I tell you? Like I can't defend that, and I no longer do.
Did you did a filmed interview with her?
I was on her show a few times, yeah. Like once when she was still on the Daily Wire, and then another time when she was on her own platform. I debated Dave Smith, and then we had a separate conversation. So it was like about a year apart.
I'm gonna go rewatch those. You guys can watch that too. I didn't even know that those existed. What's Dave Smith like in real life, in person?
Dave Smith, I mean, we did it virtually, but you know, I mean, that's sort of the same as meeting, I guess. I mean, you know, at the time, like I did feel like there was a real shortage of engagement with these ideas with the other side on this stuff. There was a lot of people writing hit pieces and articles and, you know, name calling and shaming. And I didn't know how constructive that was. I would rather, like, you know, I think we're strong enough to engage with these ideas, and I stand by what I stand by. So if you approach Dave in good faith, he approaches you back in good faith. And at the time he was you know, I think I think people were trying to say like, oh, he's some comedian or whatever, but he's a good communicator. And I think he's a formidable opponent in debate. And so we had a civil, like, hour and change long debate on her show, and Candace stayed out of it most of the time. It was kind of 2-on-1 because it's not like she ever chimed in to back up anything I said, but for the most part, she let me and Dave have the conversation / debate. And I thought it was constructive and more civil than than a lot of the other ones he's done. But at the same time, over time, you know, Dave has really shown to me sometimes to not only like be a bad judge of morality in the context of the Middle East and getting those ideas wrong, but also a very bad judge of character in some of the people he's associated with. And especially for someone who's been so defensive of being called self-hating or an anti-Semite. Like, I don't think he's a self-hating person. But I don't think but his associations and friendships like Sneeko and Jake Shields and Fuentes and these people who are so proudly anti-Semitic, it's like, hey man, maybe you're not you know, and then putting himself forward as a Jew who says, hey, anti-Semitism is not a big deal, it's not really happening. It's like, it doesn't strike me that you really care that much about Jewish safety or continuity or the community. Maybe the identity itself doesn't matter to you that much. Maybe anti-Semitism doesn't bother you that much, but just come out and say that. That was the thing that was starting to bother me a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you engage Dave in good faith, he engages back. That's generally been the case with him. And if you start to, you know, go after him personally and do personal attacks, he'll play that game also. So that's what I've noticed.
Well, isn't that the key? Like, you know, one of the things I often think about, because everyone is always trying to recreate who Charlie was. And, you know, they're like, oh, you know, he believed in debate, he believed in discourse, and he did.
Yes.
The other thing that he didn't do is he didn't go out and debate Nick Fuentes. What he was very careful about was not debating people that don't act in good faith. And I do think that's the important element of this, because, and I've had these debates with people that are not acting in good faith, where like when they can just lie and they can create their own reality and you're just standing there left with the facts. It's like, what am I doing here? Like you know what I mean? Like there's nothing productive taking place there. And I think there's so many people out there that aren't acting in good faith that will just say whatever they need to win that discussion. And they're not willing to be wrong at all, no matter how much you prove it to them. I think that's just counterproductive ultimately.
Yeah, because I mean, look, so I will say, just to button up that point, I think Dave overall does act in good faith. Like when he goes on, whether it's trigonometry or when he debated me or any of these other platforms he goes on, you know, I think he genuinely believes what he believes. I think he's an anarcho-capitalist. He believes, you know, government is as a entity is evil. It's a mechanism of force, and like the bigger the government, the more powerful the government, the more evil it is. I don't want to caricature his arguments, but in general, I think he believes what he's saying. And so that's somebody in good faith if they genuinely believe what they're saying. It doesn't mean I don't think his ideas are dangerous or wrong. And it doesn't mean I don't think his associations are severely misguided or that he doesn't quite see that it can be kind of damaging to the perception of him when he's out there chilling with Sneeko or Jake Shields, who are not good faith actors. I don't see how that's fruitful, productive, or useful at all for the case he's making. But besides that, I think he's a good faith actor. And I can't say the same for other people in the space of like who use civil dialogue and discourse, like when Fuentes does it, as simply a manipulation tactic, as a way to seem moderate and palatable. While, you know, when you're on your live stream, you'll talk about executing the Jewish occult when you take power and encouraging your audience to do so, and then saying, I'm not violent, I'm Catholic, I don't want any of that, I'm just a nice person. And then you just traffic in some of the most disgusting, you know, ideas. And You know, you have nefarious intentions. So that's why I don't think Charlie would engage with the Fuentes or Myron Gaines or any of these people, because they traffic in really awful, terrible, disgusting ideas, and they're not acting in good faith. And I don't attribute that to Dave, but that's the distinction I would make.
You know, where Dave came on my radar was definitely during COVID. I think he made a lot of great points, and I definitely lean somewhere in the libertarian. Like, I do believe in, like, the smaller the government, the better.
Yeah, so do I. So do I, actually.
More just like extreme conservatism as opposed to necessarily libertarianism.
Well, conservatarians. You're probably a conservatarian.
Yeah, so yeah, somewhere in there. Like, I believe in personal liberty. Like, if you want to, I don't care if you marry another dude, or I just don't care. Don't shove it in my face. That's where I'm at. So he made a lot of things that he said.
No pun intended. Yeah. He
said a lot of things that made a lot of good sense to me during that
totally
time.
I am kind of libertarian sympathetic too on a lot of that, and during COVID I was with him, totally. So
he just seems like he's gotten much more radical when it comes to and again, I do think that October 7th broke a lot of people's brains. I really do, one way or the other.
The issue with sort of radical libertarianism, and I'm on board with it on a lot of things domestically, especially when it comes to economics and keeping the government as small as possible and leaving max personal liberty, is that you have a population of people that values such things, has those values. But if you apply that ethic across the board, it's not always applicable. I don't think the state, just because a state is powerful or has a strong military, it's necessarily determinant of how evil it is. I think intended goals, intended actions, intentionality does matter. I think if you intentionally target civilians as an act of terrorism, that's very different than civilians dying in collateral damage when it comes to a government that's protecting its own civilian population in war. What are the stated aims and goals of said government? You have to determine, does the government do a very good job at securing and protecting individual liberty and values that you care about? I think America does do that. I think Israel does do that. There are differences in different regimes. And I think in the libertarian mindset, the strictly libertarian mindset, or the anarcho-capitalist anarchist mindset, that the government itself, basically, as a mechanism of force and coercion, must necessarily be evil. And therefore, like, the regimes that are evil, like North Korea, and whatever oppressive regimes they are, well, that's what government is. That makes the most sense. That's the natural state of government. And so they never seem to hold agency or accountability to those things, because that's what government is supposed to be. And it's only the hegemony and the imperialist efforts of the Western powers that are actually the biggest spreaders of evil around the world. And I just think that's a strange lens by which to view things, to not be able to see the difference between countries that generally do a better job at protecting individual rights and liberties versus regimes that don't. And the big thing is that if you apply this sort of a volunteerism to the Middle East and presume that in every part of the world they hold the same values you do, everybody just wants to raise their families and have sandwiches, and that's it. That's all they want, completely ignoring, say, the radical ideologies and religious fanatical ideologies that have swept this region in the form of radical Islam that is offended by the idea of any Jewish sovereignty or Western presence in this area, that seeks to wipe it out since the year 600, 700. Like, yeah, that's not it. That has no bearing on what's going on here. I think it's just the dangerous naivete that's applied to this, because I don't think any of this has anything to do with geography or property rights disputes. It has to do with ideology and the idea that the Yahud are the great Satan that must be fought, and it's a religious war, and that seems to be completely ignored on the libertarian side.
Oh, I agree. And did you watch the Jimmy Dore Tucker Carlson interview?
I saw bits of it. Yeah.
Did you enjoy being lectured that Russia is actually more democratic than the United States? I love that whole segment. That was great.
Yeah. He's
go ahead.
He's a wacky dude, Jimmy Dore. What can I tell you?
And I also really appreciated Tucker Carlson just nodding in agreement. That was
I loved how he went off on Erica Kirk at the end, and then Tucker said, "Thank you." What a coward. Couldn't even push back on that. You know what my mom did? When my mom passed away, we got a gold suit and sparklers, and we grieved. That's what we did. Remember? He kind of sounds like Joe Biden a little bit, Jimmy Dore. Well, folks, he did. That's what my mom got sparklers. Because that's what they did. Because, and he's just pushing all the most conspiratorial garbage. And Tucker's just like, wow, right. So true. It is. Yeah, anyway.
Israel's the only beacon of freedom and decency in the Middle East, surrounded by the turds. not to be confused with Kurds. Look what's happening in Europe. Wake up, America. I do think we need to wake up. And, this is the other thing that I've been trying to make people understand. I do think that China and Russia, but I think China is pushing this anti-Semitic stuff big time on social media. I think there's a lot of that. And what people don't realize is they would love if we broke our relationship with Israel, because what they're going to do is they're going to fill that vacuum. They've been trying to get in Israel for strategic reasons, that they want to have dominance in the Middle East. And the key to that is Israel. So if they can get the United States, we can get Tucker Carlson for president, say we're breaking all relationships with Israel. We're not sending them any money. We're not doing any of this stuff. You will see China in there the next day, selling them weapons, building relationships with them, and then making sure that they have a foothold in Israel, because they want it for the strategic value of where it's at, the geographic strategic value of the Middle East. So,
yeah,
people are being tricked against their own interests. This is the most important question that you're going to get this year, at least. Ami, peanut butter on French toast.
Is that something that comes up in your stream a lot, or is it just a random question?
There is never a show that we do where this question is not asked. And usually by Rage Bronson, but if Rage doesn't show up in the comments, I will make sure I ask it, because it's become the critical question.
I am a big peanut butter guy. I eat it by the spoonful, so that sounds good to me. Put it on anything, I'll eat it. I'm a big peanut butter guy. So what can I tell you? Rage Bronson, we love that peanut butter spread. It's so great. So many nuts, so many allergies from these sissy woke lefty liberals. It's terrible. So many. They're very soft. They're so soft. They're nutty. Tucker's a peanut. He's a nutty guy. That's what he's a cookie guy. Cookie butter, we call him. Cookie butter Tucker.
What is Israel doing about the 60,000 Palestinian Authority armed troops in Judea, Samaria? All caps, lots of question marks.
What is Israel doing about the 60,000 Palestinian Authority armed troops? I hope something. Good Lord. Yeah. Keep us posted.
You are very funny. I laugh a lot with your videos. Keep up the good work. You're making a difference. Good to hear more.
Thank you.
That was $5 Canadian. That's like I don't know, like 50 cents.
Well, it's from Canada, so it's not worth much. It's like really in decay. Fix that. So fix that, Trudeau.
Jordan Peterson that much. I didn't realize how good it was. I'm a big fan of Jordan.
It's dangerous liberty, especially if you try to do that in Toronto, when they're telling these truckers in the Emergency Powers Act that they can't access their bloody bank accounts. So it's a tyrannical, authoritarian, left-wing regime. It's a bloody mess. That's what it is. So
I love it. Gary, why don't the Iranians help? Their oppressed ones seems like they should be finishing what Trump started. Folks, they are. They have protested the numbers, and I think the more that I research this and talk to more people that are in the know, when you have 40,000 people protesting that were killed, and there's been more since then, I think they're doing everything that they possibly can do. And what's your take, Ami?
It's hard to know, we see clips and footage and things. And on the one hand, we've all made the case that, over the last 2 years or so, when you see footage coming out of Gaza, Israel, during the conflict, right, during the war, things can be manipulated. It's hard to decipher what reality is. And it's funny to see everybody flip when it comes to Iran. Everybody takes everything coming out of Gaza at face value from the Hamas-run health ministry in terms of numbers, but they completely downplay numbers in Iran, right? Because it doesn't suit the narrative. They'll be like, "Now we don't know. We have to wait and see." So it's funny how all of a sudden they put a lot of stake on waiting and seeing when it doesn't suit the narrative. But it's known in Iran that it's a very different kind of setup where you have a rich history of Persian culture, proud Persian culture, that was Islamized and taken over in 1979. And people were suppressed, that freedoms were stripped away. Like the grandparents that grew up in Iran grew up in a freer, more secular Iran than their grandchildren. It's within memory what it could have been and what it could look like. So you have at your disposal a population of people, I think, ready to receive an entire different way of life. They've had it before. And you see that in droves in protests in the street. to the extent that they can actually express themselves. But remember, like a lot of this stuff gets covered up because they have internet blackouts, and then they slaughter protesters in the street. The things that they do, like you have to hear from people on the ground and from Iranians who tell me what's going on, who have family there and who are very passionate about the issue. So in terms of how they can actually fight back, I don't know what it would take to do that. But yeah, it's easy for us to say, why don't they do more when we live comfortably in the West in our armchairs and our safe homes, protected under the protections of the United States. We don't live in a society where to even speak out against the regime can cost you your life. It's a lot to ask, but to the extent that they're doing it. So,
and I think this, Iran and many other instances it highlights just how important the Second Amendment actually is.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had the Second Amendment over there and people were armed. I do think they would have a much larger capacity to be able to push back in this regime, which is why the first thing that every totalitarian regime is going to do is they're going to disarm the people, and they're going to do it under the guise of safety and security. Like, we got to get safety. You got to make sure you're secure. We just want you to be safe. We're going to take care of you. And that's what's going on, folks. And, we have a armed and violent revolution that took place in Iran. But one of the things we've been highlighting over the last, 6+ months is talking about the color revolution that's taking place, or they're attempting to do. And it's the right, the far right, and the far left. They're trying to make that happen. And that's one of the things I've talked about too, is like, I think that all of that, what we're seeing on the woke right, which is like the neo-Nazi party, really down to it, is just the globalist agenda repackaged for the right. That's what they want. They want this severe isolationism to take place to where we lose standing in the world. We don't have control. We have lost the hegemony in the world that keeps us safe. And that's what's happened. Stay armed, folks.
It's the product of comfort and privilege. It's like that phrase is ever so true, right? Hard times create hard men create good times create soft men create hard times. And that's the cycle we're in right now, of soft men creating hard times, because they forget the very thing that made the times good to begin with.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Hi, Gary. Hi, Ami. You have the best guest, Gary. Well, except that one time.
What did I miss?
Does Ami have a Gary impression?
Oh, no soup for Knowles. Well, it's been about 2 hours. That's enough for me to download about 60% maybe. Yeah. A Gary impression. He's putting me on the spot, but you sort of have you got the Southern thing going, and I mean, there's something. I don't really have the tone. There's tone. It's visuals. It's different kinds of things that we're discussing. And, one of the things I try to talk about on the show, and I've talked about it a lot, Gary, there's a lot of thing you do there where it's like, I've talked about it a lot. I'm not sure if your producers are enjoying this, if they're seeing that it's accurate, but, whether it's, people are they're indifferent. I think when it comes to Israel, you got a couple things going on, because you got Candace and you got Tucker, but you also got Megyn, and what I always try to figure out is I look at the evidence. I try to break down what's going on. I try to figure out what's going on. And if I can't figure out what's going on, I don't make a decision until I actually come to a conclusion that's reasonable. But a lot of these other people, what they're doing is they're just kind of saying a whole bunch of nonsense. And I don't know. I just think we got to figure out what's good. What's your take?
You nailed it.
Gary. That's Gary.
That's me.
He's literally got your mannerisms down to a T.
Okay. I'm taking you back off the thing.
There you go.
Dave Smith is a bad faith bunny and a doof nugget.
I've never heard that one before.
Nugget is, but I'll go with that. Listen to Dave all through COVID. He pushed Scott Horton propaganda defending the Houthis. In every conflict, he always sides with our enemies. And that's what all leftists do. And I see that a lot with libertarians, and I don't know why.
Right. So it's not as much like what they do is what they'll do is they excuse the actions of the enemies because they simply characterize them as reactions to us. It's never them. It's never us reacting to them, right? It's always we act in the world, and the only thing that ever happens bad in the world is as a result, a reaction to our actions. It's never looked at the other way, that maybe we have to react in the world because of hostility coming towards us. It's not as if the Houthis are determined to destroy the Jews, as it says on their flag, a curse on the Jews. and Israel has to react to aggression from the Houthis, from Iran, from Hezbollah, from Hamas. No, it's Israel's actions that are causing them to react. But maybe you might want to consider that Israel is the one reacting, and rightfully so. So that's the big flaw in their argument.
I know at least 2 people who fled from Iran at the revolution. Sadly, they're both Democrats. Well, that's pretty wild.
One of them, Patrick David? No, Patrick's not a Democrat.
No, almost all Iranian refugees that I know from that time period, almost everyone that I know is Republican, pretty conservative, to say the least.
Yeah, it's a thing that Patrick David talked. I'm capitalist. That's what he's talking about there. It's so much capitalism. We like that. Okay.
Apparently, I'm a super chat. I'm gonna go back up here and get this one, and we will.
Yeah, you got the old mean lady there. She wants a super chat. She wants to talk about that. That's but I like that. Yeah. There's PBD for you.
There you go. You've been on the PBD podcast, haven't you?
I haven't. No, I haven't been on PBD. In due time.
In due time.
But I like that. I've done PBD. He knows. He's seen the voice. It's like that. But what are you gonna do?
Old mean lady, I'm not seeing another super chat. Jen, see if you can find her other super chat. Well, listen,
old mean lady, a nasty woman. Old mean lady, she's a nasty woman. Yes. Anyway,
no, I love this. I appreciate you coming on so much. Again, I appreciate everything that you do. I think you are the right voice, the right time, that brings a little humor to what's going on, and rightfully so. And I think we need more of that. That's for sure. If you will, just take a minute and I don't know, tell the viewers any final words that you have for them.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for having me. Been great to schmooze, great to talk. Guys, want to follow me and see more of my stuff? You can follow me on Instagram at Ami Kozak. It's Ami Kozak Official, at Ami Kozak on Twitter. The podcast is called the Ami's House Podcast. You can go to my Patreon as well, patreon.com/Ami's House. So wherever you find your podcasts, page on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of that, it's streaming everywhere. I also have a band called Distant Cousins if you want to go listen to some music and take a break from politics and all of this stuff. But otherwise, I perform stand-up all over this country and around the world. So follow me on Instagram for tour dates there. And thanks so much for watching.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I didn't know you had you were in a band as well.
Yeah.
Jen, make sure you link that down in the description too after we're done here. So I'm going to download some music out there. Well, listen, folks, we really appreciate you tuning in, and we appreciate your supporting of Ami. We appreciate you supporting us. Make sure you go follow him on all of his social media. Make sure you take care of him. We got Continued Freedom, says $5 to say thanks for the great PBD impression and for the decent Gary impression. LOL. Keep making us laugh, brother. Yeah.
Amen.
Awesome. All right, folks, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. Ami, you don't go anywhere, but for everybody else, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.